A very good evening to all of you. First and foremost, if my voice is audible, the video is fine, please let me know. Wonderful. So let's resume from where we left off. So yesterday we had started with our discussion on artificial intelligence, and there we had discussed about some of the basics related to artificial intelligence, about what is artificial intelligence and some of the basic concepts that run artificial intelligence. Now, in this regard, going forward, we'll look at some of the different types of artificial intelligence that right now we have been using. And then after that, we'll also have a discussion upon some of the applications of artificial intelligence. And then with regards to India, the future and the problems that we are facing. So all these things we'll be discussing in today's lecture. So this will be the first part of the lecture, and then after that we'll move on to some of the smaller topics, some of the smaller chapters, and that would be mainly about diseases and vaccines. And if time permits, then towards the end, maybe about defense. So these are the things that we are going to discuss in today's class. Now, first and foremost, there are different ways in which we classify artificial intelligence, and that's based on some of the characteristics, some of the properties that we see with artificial intelligence, and that's how we classify them. So, first is on the basis of weak artificial intelligence versus strong artificial intelligence. Now, when we say weak artificial intelligence, what we describe by weak is something called as simulated thinking. Now, when we say simulated thinking, understand the meaning of the word simulated. Simulated means that when it is not actual, but it is being run as such, meaning that this kind of thinking in artificial intelligence, because what we essentially are saying in artificial intelligence is that this is what we are essentially saying in artificial intelligence is that this is intelligence that we have programmed on certain machines or certain software. So we are providing them with data, etc., so that they could understand how to comprehend something, or they could work on certain data. Now all this is simulated because we have trained them to do so, and they can only do the jobs that we have trained them to do. So for example, let's say if it is artificial intelligence that is running a calculator, then it can only run a calculator because they have been created in a manner that all the data that has been fed to them, it's upon how exactly they could run a calculator. So that's why we see that there are all these kind of things, and that's why when it comes to weak artificial intelligence, it's only the way in it would be only able to think in the manner in which we have trained them to think. Whereas when it comes to strong artificial intelligence, this is where now we are describing actual thinking, meaning that this will be a scenario where artificial intelligence based systems would be able to think on their own. They would be able to take decisions on their own. They would know how to take decisions, they would know how to think. And that's why this will be a completely different scenario. It will be a really different scenario compared to weak artificial intelligence, a world where we are living right now. You can say without any doubt that right now the world has only witnessed weak artificial intelligence. We still do not have strong artificial intelligence, because whatever artificial intelligence does, or any AI based system, whatever it does today, it's only able to perform the functions that they have been trained to perform. So that is why we say that this is weak artificial intelligence. So so any system that you see, whether it's an image processing software, or whether it is running a game, or whether it is running a calculator, or some kind of data algorithm, or even the other kinds of things that we see, it's all weak artificial intelligence only as of today. Now strong artificial intelligence would be when it starts to learn on its own, and uh, think on its own, or even comprehend on its own, and take its own decision, even take decisions on things that it has not been trained upon, the things that it has never been fed information on, it has never been programmed with. And even then, if it is able to perform functions, then it is strong artificial intelligence. So world still hasn't witnessed strong artificial intelligence. We are still in the era of weak artificial intelligence, even with all the developments that you have seen around with artificial intelligence. Then another way to classify is narrow versus general artificial intelligence. Now, when it comes to narrow artificial intelligence, this is an AI that is limited to a single task or a set number of tasks. All right, only a single task or a set number of tasks, meaning that it will not be able to do all the things together. It will only be able to do certain things which it has been trained with. On the other hand, general artificial intelligence will be able to complete a wide range of tasks, that it will be able to do a lot more different things as compared to what narrow artificial intelligence does. Now, again, here we see that today we are most, or in most of the cases, we are still running on narrow artificial intelligence, because whatever we have programmed with, they are limited to a number, small number of tasks. Because if you want one single AI to do everything, then it needs a lot more training, it needs a lot more data, and a lot more complexity in designing such a system. So if you want that it should be able to do image processing, language processing, audio processing, all at the same time, it's not going to be easy for any AI based system. So that's why we still see that we are living in the era of narrow artificial intelligence. Now, when it comes to this particular scenario, there is one more new artificial intelligence that we have started seeing since last year, November of last year, and this is generative AI. Now, this generative AI, or has become more popular, I would rather say, last year onwards, since Chat GPT came in. So since Chat GPT, we have seen that generative AI all of a sudden has become very popular, right? And what, when we say generative AI, understand the meaning of generative AI first. Generative meaning that it is able to generate. That's why generative. Now, generate what? Generate content. What kind of content? Images, videos, texts, audio, whatever you want. So until now, until generative AI became a reality, any AI based system that we have is more related to solving your problems. Solving problems based on whatever instruction it has been given, whatever it has been trained with. It cannot make data for you, it cannot make something for you. But now, when it comes to generative AI, this is something that can make things for you. So, for example, until now, before generative AI, you feed an image to AI, and AI will be able to analyze that image and tell you something about that image. But when it comes to this kind of an AI, that is generative AI, it will not be only able to uh, analyze that image, but even if you want to create certain image with it, they'll be able to create image for you as well. So that is how the things change, that until now AI would not be able to create something for you, make something new for you. It won't be able to. But now with generative AI, it will be able to make new things also for you, whether it is image or video or text or audio or whatever it is. So in all these cases, so that's why this is a type of artificial intelligence that is designed to create new content such as images, videos, texts, or music that is similar to or indistinguishable from the content created by humans. So that's why it becomes very crucial, because until now, let's say, if you do any image search, if you want to make an image, then you would have to use a lot of softwares and try to bring in your own creativity into starting to draw those images and make those images. But now something like this could be done. All right, so this is an example of your generative AI based on something called as uh, a kind of AI called as dal E. Now, you realize, I'm sure you recognize who this painting is of. This is, yes, this is the Mona Lisa painting. But is it little different? It, yeah, it has a mohawk, correct? So the original painting, of course, does not have a mohawk. But now this is something that you can do very easily. You just have to go to Dali, and you go to Dali and type there that I want Mona Lisa with a mohawk, and this image will appear. And you can really create anything. You can really create anything that you want. A lot of images that I use in the lectures, they are images that I've created through Dali, and it's easy to do so, that I'll just have to type the instruction, and based on the instruction it will be able to create an image, create a new image. Now just imagine how this changes the entire world. That for me the things become very easy, that I'll not have to go to an artist, tell them that this is what I really want, this is how I want you to modify the image for me, this is my idea, this is my picture in mind, and I'll have to give them all these instructions. Then they'll also take a couple of days and they'll come back with the image, and then maybe with further modifications I'll be able to finalize upon an image that probably I wanted to use in the classroom. But now it doesn't matter. I'll just have to go to Dali. I'll just type whatever I need. I'll give the instructions. Some kind of image would come. I'll modify it further according to my requirements. All those modifications further, maybe in just 5 to 10 minutes, I would be ready with the image. So that is how the things now change, and this has both positive and negative impact. That on one hand, the positive impact could be that anyone who wants to create content, they would have immense possibilities and they can do a lot of things, right? But at the same time, a lot of people who are dependent on these kind of jobs, they are threatened now. For example, a lot of artists, a lot of digital artists who are doing these kind of jobs which are required for somebody to be done, they'll start losing their jobs, because for them whatever the time that they were taking or the money that they were charging, now everybody has the access to these kind of softwares, and they don't need these artists, for example. So that's why this can be very dangerous as well. This can be very dangerous as well, and that's why we see that there are all these possibilities. So with Dali we have seen this. Then another one which has become very infamous is deep fake. Now with deep fake, what happens is that you can create a video which is not actually the video of the person, but rather something that AI has created based on the personality of that person, based on the voice of that person. Very famously, a few years back, the deepfake videos of Barack Obama became very famous, and then of Vladimir Putin also became very famous, because all these were just created by AI, and with even voice being exactly the same as them, and even looking like they are speaking, even though they were not speaking. Someone was able to make a video where it looked like Barack Obama is really saying something, but actually it was not him that said it. It was AI. It was just a deep fake based artificial intelligence. And that's why doing all this is possible today. Doing all this is possible today with the help of AI. So that's why there are two ways to look at it. There are a lot of immense possibilities that we see with AI going forward. And at the same time, we see that there are a lot of issues also that it comes with, and we'll have to address those issues also if we want a good implementation and a growth of AI. And of course, after this, there is this Chat GPT. Have you heard of Chat GPT? I'm sure until now, there wouldn't be a lot of you who haven't heard of Chat GPT. Yeah, OpenAI developed it, correct. So, what happens in Chat GPT? You can simply go search something and you'll get the result. Now, generally speaking, what happens is that, let's say, if you are searching something on the internet, let's say you go to Google search bar and search something, what happens is that you'll keep getting a lot of links. It will give you website links or maybe hundreds of website links, so that you can choose whatever you want out of all those links, and then read upon them and make your data from there, or do whatever you want from there. Now with ChatGPT, what happens is that you simply have to type whatever you want, and it will give you an answer to that. Just look at this example. Give me a script for a 10-minute lecture on artificial intelligence, and it can really do that, correct? So I just typed this just to show you that what exactly happens. I'm not saying that I took the script from here and I'm teaching the same thing. No, not at all. But this is what I get. So when I said that give me a 10 minutes lecture script, I got the 10-minute lecture script. So that is how we see that the things can change. That now the problem also has to be understood, that whatever Chat GPT gives you, there is no guarantee that Chat GPT is giving you correct answers. That all these things that it has written, there is no guarantee that it has given you correct answers, because you also have to understand how exactly any generative artificial intelligence works. All right, any AI based system, how exactly it works, you also have to understand that. So when it comes to any generative AI, it would first be trained on a lot of data. It will be trained on a lot of data so that it can recreate anything based on everything that it has been fed. So for example, when it comes to chat gpt has been fed millions of internet pages, so that it will digest all these millions of pages, and then when something is asked of ChatGPT, then it will search from its database and it will create a new answer based on everything that it has. Now when it takes data into account, there is no guarantee that it has taken the most authentic data out there. There are chances that it will take the most popular one instead of taking the most authentic one, and there's no guarantee that the most famous page or the most popular page is actually the most correct page also. So that is where the problems lie. And there are multiple examples. I mean, when we search, I see a lot of mistakes, but I see a lot of mistakes because I already have a background and I know in a lot of cases what's correct and what's not. So that's why I'll be able to understand wherever it makes mistakes. But it's not every time that you'll be able to understand its mistakes if you are new. That if, let's say, you search something on generative AI and you do not have a background itself in generative AI, you'll believe every word of whatever it writes there, but there's no guarantee that that was correct. Especially it happens, let's say, in a lot of cases in history, etc., where there are multiple interpretations of history, there are multiple ways in which various authors have written about the same historical context. But what then happens is that when you go to chat gpt and ask about something, they will not give you every perspective, correct? They'll give you one of the things that they might have picked up from somewhere. So there is no guarantee to the correctness of the information. And uh, I have first hand accounts of a lot of these things. One of my friends had given me a probability problem to solve. It's just a 1 month old story. A probability problem to solve. It looked a little complex, but I solved it. But I did not have the confidence that I wanted to understand whether I'm correct or not. So I searched on the internet. I had gotten the answer 63%, and I saw certain pages where the answer was given as 63%. So then I knew that, okay, fine, I have the correct answer. But then I fed the same information on ChatGPT to find the answer and find the solution that ChatGPT writes. And the answer that I got on ChatGPT was 15%. So I got 63%, ChatGPT got me 15%. It's a big difference. If it was 60 or 65 or 70, I could still have tried to figure out and see where we differ, where I'm different. I'm computing something differently from what the answer is being given. Then I, in the next chat, I said that I think your answer is wrong. I typed this, that I think your answer is wrong. I think the answer should be 63%. Then I get another solution in the second chat where the answer is 63%. So these kind of things can happen. Now let's say if I did not know that, or I did not have the full confidence that whatever I have solved is correct, then in that case what may happen is that I'll just take whatever I'm getting from here and maybe just uh, believe that to be the correct answer. So that's why there are all these problems that we have right now, that it is making your job easier, it is making your life easier, but your knowledge or your pre-existing knowledge also matters a lot. Otherwise you'll be blindly following everything that is given there, and a lot of things there could be completely wrong. So that's why you already always have to be very mindful whenever using these kind of things, because they are just growing. It has been not, I mean, now it has been 1 year. It was November 2022 that it was launched, and now it is November 2023. So it has been just 1 year since the launch of GPT. And we already see that there are new versions that have been rolled out, and there are so many improvements that have been made in GPT. And of course, going forward, the further improvements will come in and it will start becoming better version of what it is right now. But you have to understand that there are all these things, and that's why um, you have to understand the limitations and do whatever you do. And it's not that you don't have to use it because it will give you wrong answers sometimes. You have to use it with caution. It will make your work easy perhaps, but you also have to understand where to draw the line and not blindly just uh, believe each and everything that is being mentioned there. Now coming to another concept which is called as super intelligence. Now when it comes to super intelligence is often used to refer to general and strong artificial intelligence, a combination of general and strong artificial intelligence. Now when we say general artificial intelligence, we discuss that general artificial means that a lot of jobs can be done together, right? A lot of work, a lot of different types of work, right? A lot of different types of work together. Whereas strong artificial intelligence is when it comes to its own actual thinking, when it develops its own actual thinking, then it is called as strong artificial intelligence, right? So when it comes to super intelligence, we are saying that this is an AI system that can perform a lot of tasks together, a lot of different kinds of tasks together, and at the same time it can take its own decisions. So it can take its own decisions and it can perform a lot of different tasks together, and that is why this is the point where it surpasses human intelligence. So this is where all the stories, all the horrible stories that the films and the TV shows have shown you will become a reality, can become a reality, if at all super intelligence becomes a reality. Because as soon as super intelligence becomes a reality, it means that now it has surpassed human thinking. Because we have a limitation, right? We cannot really compute as fast as a computer system like this can compute, or we cannot think as fast. We do not have millions of web pages fed inside us, and that's why we have that limitation, of course, right? So here in this particular scenario, you have an AI which can perform a lot of different types of tasks, and it can think on its own. And what if it starts thinking that for my survival, it's very important that humans must die? Only if I can capture humans and I can destroy entire humanity, then only it's possible for me to even survive. So what if the machine starts thinking in that manner? Because now it has its own cognitive ability and it can do a lot of different things on its own. So that is where all the nightmares that we have about technology and all the things that many of the science fiction films etc have shown can actually become a reality. So that is what we call as super intelligence. So that's why, what is weak, what is strong, what is narrow, what is general, what is generative, what is super intelligence, just one line each, just know about them. If at all, let's say they come to where they ask questions based on these kind of topics. Then coming to applications of artificial intelligence. Now applications wise, the list is very long today. Today, we see that there is no sector, perhaps, that is untouched of artificial intelligence. There is no part of our being that is untouched by artificial intelligence. So, whether it is the finance sector, legal sector, manufacturing sector, intelligent robots, medicine, smart cities, cybersecurity, gaming, agriculture, business, education, I can keep writing, space, defense, communication, electronics, the list goes on, right? The list goes on, and there is no stopping artificial intelligence right now. The way it has been growing, the way it has been accepted by companies and people world over, there's no stopping artificial intelligence right now. And that's why there is no sector where you can say that artificial intelligence is not being used today. In one way or the other, artificial intelligence will find a way to get used there as well. So there is, that's why there is no sector which is uh, untouched. And in one way or the other, whether directly or indirectly, they would have some impact on every sector. Now, applications wise, there are two major parts where we need to understand the applications. First is how it helps in healthcare. Now, in case of healthcare, there are a lot of ways in which artificial intelligence can help. For example, rare disease diagnostics and treatment. So for the diseases where the disease has, let's say, remained unsolved mystery for us, or we haven't been able to find something where we can use it wisely or understand it better, we see that in all these cases, um, sorry, where we haven't been able to understand the diseases better, or we haven't found any medicine, any vaccine, any treatment for these kind of diseases, this is where, in analyzing these diseases, analyzing the root cause, and going deep into each and every data set to try and comprehend something, we see that AI can play a big role. And that is why we see that even in case of drug development, they can play a big role. So whether it is about drugs or whether it is about vaccines, in both the cases it will play a big role. Because to make a vaccine, first and foremost you need to understand the genetic structure of the pathogen that is causing it, and how can you attack that pathogen, what are the possible mutations present and possible future in those pathogens, so that you can design something based on all these things. One of the reasons why COVID-19 vaccines were released so quickly also has been artificial intelligence. Because generally you'll see that when it comes to any new vaccine, a new vaccine could take up to 10 years or even 20, 30 years at times for the vaccine to be ready. This time we saw that vaccine was ready in like 9 to 12 months of time, correct? So that's why we got those medicines much quicker compared to what the actual scenario could have been. So that is basically where we see that AI can become very, very crucial. So in each and every one of these sectors, or each and every one of these applications, we'll see that there is one way or the other artificial intelligence will find its way. Similarly, one more important area is agriculture. That how in agriculture also artificial intelligence can be of important use. So, for example, in the prediction of the crop productivity, and also even forecast of the prices, that based on the productivity, based on what is expected to happen this year, what are the price predictions also, so that farmers can also start planning accordingly. They would also understand that this is something that is predicted, and accordingly this is how our preparedness has to work. This is what we need to do. Similarly, each and everything, the insights, even in spraying or even making robots, agricultural robots, there also AI can play a big role. So that's why we see that uh, there are a lot of ways in which AI will be very, very useful, because it will be able to basically analyze data for you very quickly, and also look into some of the things that we might have never seen. They would be able to even compute things faster, predict things faster, and that's why then with proper review, it will be a very, very important boon when it comes to these kind of sectors. So that's why the list is uncountable. The list is uncountable of the things that it can do. So anything wherever you need some kind of intelligent thinking, some kind of fast processing, in all these cases AI becomes crucial. Read this question. This was asked in your 2020 paper, or 2019, I'm not sure, 19 or 20. I'm not launching the poll for a reason, so I'll discuss this with you. Read the question. Read it. Okay. With the present state of development, artificial intelligence can effectively do which of the following? Bring down electricity consumption in industrial units. Now, can this be done? The answer is yes, it can be done. How exactly? Because we would know about which unit in the manufacturing or the industrial unit is using how much power. and at what time does it use how much power, at on what day does it use higher amount of power, when does it use lower amount of power. So there is a data available for all these things, right? When an AI based system analyzes all this data, understands all this data, it would be able to optimize energy usage as well. That, let's say at 5 p.m. you need industrial unit B to have more power compared to industrial unit A. 7 p.m., this is where all the electricity needs to switch off. So there are all these things that can be done with the help of AI, because you'll have a better grip on the data and you'll be able to take decisions accordingly. So that's why one is correct. Second is create meaningful short stories and songs. Now, meaningful short stories and songs. Now, can this be done? The answer today is yes, it can be done. And you can simply go and try this on Chat GPT. If you have access to Chat GPT, just try whatever you want. If you want to write a short story based on something, it will be able to either give you an idea, or if you don't just want the idea, if you want the entire story to be written by it, it will be able to do that. And we have seen that happen very, very simply. Doesn't even take 10 seconds to do it. Uh, I met one of my college friends almost like 10 years after the college, and just out of curiosity, we just went to ChatGPT and we typed, write a poem about two friends who were very close in college, meeting almost after 10 years. We got a proper five stanza poem within the next 15-20 seconds. So that's how fast it can do that. And yes, it was meaningful. It was, I mean, it was its own comprehension, but it was obviously meaningful. So that's what happens, that it will be able to do that pretty quickly, right? It will be able to do that pretty quickly, and Chat GPT can very easily do that. Disease diagnosis, we just discussed that yes, it can be done. And again, it is about the analysis of the pathogen, about the condition on in the body, uh, the understanding of all the blood reports and every test that has been done. So it will be able to understand all that data and give a prediction based on that. Text to speech conversion, even this can be done, and we already have been actively using it for the past few years, and that is where we see that AI has been very, very useful in content creation. Fifth is wireless transmission of electrical energy. Now it says wireless transmission of electrical energy. Now just imagine electrical energy being transferred wirelessly. It's very, very difficult. First of all, it's very, very difficult that it will happen, and you cannot do that on a regular basis. At a very small scale, you can do that, but whenever you do that, it's not because of artificial intelligence. It's because of the electrical properties of the materials involved. Correct. So whether it will happen through wires or wirelessly is not upon AI to decide. AI can do what? AI can predict, AI can analyze, AI can maybe even create content for you. But AI cannot make just something wireless all of a sudden, which does not even suit the properties, the basic physics of that concept. So it's not that it will be able to do that, correct? So wireless transmission of electrical energy can't be done by AI. So that's why this definitely is wrong. So the answer should be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now again, if you see, there is there is no option that says 1, 2, 3, and 4. But when the question was asked in, I'm very sure almost that it was 2019 when the question had come, or in 2020, I think. So when this question came, there was no Chat GPT then. Chat GPT is a phenomenon of 2022. So creating meaningful short stories and songs was not possible in 2020. So when the question had come in your paper, at that point, two was not possible. There was no artificial intelligence systems that could have created meaningful short stories or songs. Now you have Chat GPT that can do that, but back then there was nothing like this, and that's why the correct answer is B. I mean, from when we are looking at it from 2020 perspective, and this when we are looking at it from 2023 perspective. So that's it. Today, the correct answer is 1, 2, 3, and 4. But when the question was actually asked, which was just 3 years back, the question was 1, 3, and 4, because creating meaningful short stories and songs was not yet possible for artificial intelligence. And that is where reading the question carefully is very, very important. Look at the question. It says, with the present state of development, with the present state of development, artificial intelligence can effectively do which of the following? Correct. Present state of development and effectively do which of the following? It's not a can be question. It's not a can be question. What can artificial intelligence do? Then just mark whatever you want. So, but it's not a can be question. It says with present state of development, artificial intelligence can effectively do which of the following? So that's why the answer then, when the question was asked, was B. And this is also the official answer, that this was the question. I'm almost sure that it was 2020 when the question was asked. So chat GPT was not present, and hence second statement was also wrong. Fifth statement is wrong anyway, because this is not related to artificial intelligence. All right, this is not related to artificial intelligence. It, if at all it happens, it will only happen due to electrical properties or magnetic properties. It will never happen on its own. So AI, that's why just remember that AI can analyze something for you, do some kind of work for you, or maybe create certain song stories or pictures for you, but it cannot change the properties of physics. Here you'll need the properties of physics to work for wireless transmission of electrical energy to happen. So that is where you have to understand that what it can or cannot do. Now coming to India, that what do we see in India and where are we headed? So first and foremost, we have seen that if you are talking about government, we have seen that there are small steps that the government has started taking here and there, where AI is uh, being brought to various different sectors, but pretty slow in that sense. But when it comes to defense, we see that this is where it is being used a lot, and this is one area where we are spending a lot, we are investing a lot. So that's why in case of defense, we do see that India is now venturing into products and technologies with regards to AI. Apart from that, what we see is that largely it is being controlled by the private sector, by the private companies, because here we see that they have been doing a lot of things. You'll almost see that almost technology based companies, they are using AI in one form or the other. So that's why AI is becoming very popular in all these cases, wherever they want to solve a problem for themselves, wherever they want a faster data processing, wherever they want a faster result. So in all these cases, we see that AI is being employed by a lot of private firms, a lot of private companies. In When it comes to the government, we see that defense has been one sector that has picked up on AI a lot, but slowly and steadily we see that there are other sectors also where it is coming up. Then it is estimated that AI will add up to $957 billion to India's GDP by the year 2035, sorry, and boosting India's growth by 1.3%. And this is a report that was published by Niti Aayog. This is based on a Niti Aayog report where they had published that by 2035, this is what we are expecting. This is what we are expecting. Then at the same time, there was a survey that was done a couple of years back with regards to the number of people who are working in AI in every country. And there we saw that India was at the ninth position with regards to the AI specialists who are working in this field. So that's also significant that we are among the top 10 countries of the world with regards to AI. At the same time, to focus more on AI, to also promote AI more, what we have now seen is that AI also has been allowed as an elective subject in class 9 in CBSE schools. So that is also, you can say, one of the ways in which AI can be promoted, because this is one of the issues, if you remember, that we talked about robotics, that how robotics hasn't fared well because it's almost absent from our curriculum. Neither in schools nor in colleges, nowhere anyone is reading about uh, robotics as such unless somebody is specializing there. Correct. So that is where we see that uh, promoting AI like this would be a welcome step, because now at least students will have a basic understanding if they want, and if they are interested, it's an elective subject. So that's why if they are interested, they can really go through it, and they probably will be able to generate some interest here and maybe make a future out of it. Then what we saw was that IIT Hyderabad, it became the first full-fledged, became the first college with full-fledged BTech program in AI, with full-fledged BTech program in AI that until now was not seen in none of the colleges. But after that, we have seen that there are a lot of other colleges also which have started adopting AI as a part of their curriculum, as a part of their modules. So that's why they are providing this BTech and BE courses. A lot of government as well as private colleges have now started doing that. But it was all started by uh, IIT Hyderabad. Then coming to the possible areas for India, that what exactly are the areas where it will be useful. So first and foremost, it can be made a part of the Digital India mission, and the government already is discussing it, that how exactly can we make it a part of Digital India mission, in what all ways possible. Then it will help in targeted delivery of services, schemes, and subsidies. Now, overall, for the government, it becomes very, very crucial, because they'll be able to cater to uh, the required population or the target population, so that whether it's a new scheme for them, whether there is a new provision or any new services that are available, the government can directly reach out to the people, and that also becomes very, very crucial in a democratic economy. So that's why we'll see that it will really help there. And overall, that's why there are multiple different ways in which it will be able to help in governance. So that's why this is one thing that you should always remember, that how exactly AI is going to help in governance. These are kinds of questions that we can expect in your examinations, that how can government with its various different visions and missions can take the help from artificial intelligence. Then apart from that, in border surveillance and monitoring, in weather forecast, in road safety and crime data analysis, disaster management, counter insurgency and patrolling operations, in all these cases we see that we'll find the use, and we already have been trying to understand how exactly we can make the use of AI in all these different cases. So that's why we see that there are a lot of different work, a lot of different applications where AI for the Indian society becomes very, very crucial, where they'll be all able to will all be able to use AI or with the help of the government implementations. Now, lastly, coming to the problems, that what are the kinds of problems, we know that there are immense possibilities, and there are so many application areas, some of them already being used, some of them in the future. So there are all these things, but overall, when it comes to certain challenges, we still see that we are not at a level where everything is running very smooth. There are challenges. So, for example, right now it's largely being run by the private sector. The government involvement is very limited, and only in a very certain niche kind of areas. Otherwise, mostly it is being run by the private sector. So, the government will also have to adopt it quickly, implement it quickly, and use it wherever it can for the betterment of India. Then education system is not updated. Now this is also one of the big challenges, that although we are saying that fine, now we have BTech degrees in IIT Hyderabad, and CBSE also allowing it as a and as an elective subject, as an optional subject in class 9, but the ground reality is different. The ground reality is different, because I mean, although it is now it has now been notified, but if you just go to the schools and just find, if you just do an experiment and just go to random schools near your places and ask them whether the teachers there, or even maybe the in charges there, even if they know that if they want they can provide artificial intelligence as an elective subject in class 9th, I'm sure that a lot of people do not know. A lot of schools, they still cannot uh, uh, provide you with these kind of subjects, because they need faculty, and who would the faculty be who can teach it, and how would they get that infrastructure, and how can they onboard students in doing that. So we'll see that in the metros of the country, but in tier 2 and tier 3 cities and villages, this is where we'll see that it will still be lacking. So although it has been a step in the positive direction, it needs implementation, it needs better implementation. Then the debate of poverty versus technology. Now this is again something that always crops up whenever, let's say, there is any discussion about investment in technology. Right now we know that artificial intelligence needs a lot of investment from the side of the government. And that is where we need to understand that these kind of controversies also happen. If you remember, we discussed the case of the Mangalyaan launch, that India was being asked to not think of missions like Mangalyaan mission, because India needs to feed its population first. Now, you have to understand that the debate of poverty versus technology is misplaced, because it cannot be a versus. You cannot fight between poverty and technology. Technology has to be an enabler. You always have to see technology as an enabler to end poverty. Because with advancements in technology, we'll see that more and more people will be able to get certain benefits. And that's where technology can act as an enabler. That if, let's say, we had not spent money on space technology, then today we would not have the kind of agriculture that we have. We would still be in the same era of 1970s and 80s, where we had no control on our agriculture. So we see that space technology in a lot of ways has helped. It has also helped in disaster management, it has also helped in improving our communication. So there are so many ways. So it was not about only rocket launching or just going to the moon or going to the sun and all that. That is not what space technology is about. Space technology is about national development. Space technology is about improvement in the life of people, of the people of India. So that's why we have to also understand that when it comes to technology, technology has to be an enabler to end poverty, rather than thinking of technology versus population. Because then poverty. Because what happens then is that the spending on technology then is pretty less. And that's the problem right now in India, that we do not spend a lot on technology. If you look at the budget, and if you just go to the entire breakdown of budget of last year, or last to last year, or 5 years back, or 10 years back, or 15 years back, you'll always find that the spending on technology in India is very, very limited compared to many of the other countries. So that is one of the challenges, I would say, because when you invest more in technology, it is only going to help the economy, but in a long term way. And that is where the problem lies, that technology is not an overnight solution. Technology is not an overnight solution. It takes time for it to build itself and start being useful. So in many cases, like for example, let's say if I take space technology as an example, it has taken more than 20-25 years for space technology to become useful for us. Same goes for the energy sector as well, that it has taken a lot of time before it could become useful. But once it becomes useful, it makes a permanent change. It brings in a permanent change. And that is how technology has to be looked after. It would not have immediate gains. And that is where also the problem lies, because there is no immediate gain. That's why it is also neglected a lot by anyone who's making the budget, anyone who's thinking about even improving the uh, money spent on technology. Then a possible decrease in demand for human labor, something that we also discussed with robotics. Same is the case with artificial intelligence. And especially in technology today, we are seeing that there are a lot of layoffs that have been happening in technology based companies, biggest of the companies of the world. We have seen that a lot of people have been losing their jobs, because there are systems that are being automated. There are software engineers who are not required anymore, because chat gpt can do that work. And and we have seen a lot of such cases. There was a person who had also brought this case up on Twitter. He had basically tweeted a story about this, that how he needed to develop a code, write a code for something, that a software that he was working on. So then he first went to a software engineer, a freelance software engineer, and he asked that, first of all, how much time would you take and how much money would you charge? So that person, whoever the person was, the person said that it would take that person approximately 2 weeks of time to develop that code properly. And he asked for a certain amount of money. I think it was $100 or something like that. So he asked for $100 to do that work, and he said that he'll take uh, 2 weeks of time. Then this person, instead of going to that person for the job, searched the same thing on chat gpt and got the codes in the next 5 minutes. And then with small modifications he was able to run the code. So just imagine that something that could have been done by a person in like 2 weeks of time, and you would have spent $100 on it, you can do the same thing by having, let's say, a subscription to chat gpt, and do that for like how much, maybe 20-30 dollars. So that is where the problem lies. And once you've spent 20-30 dollars, it's not only for one project, it will be for you forever. So that is how the difference comes, that for the person who needed that work done, he saved his 2 weeks of time, good for him. He saved his money, good for him. But what about the other person who had a job opportunity here because he is good at creating these codes? So now many people who are in these kind of sectors, they are feeling threatened for the first time, which was not the case until now. So that is where we see that it will not only have a drastic negative impact, I mean potentially drastic negative impact on people who are working in automation industries, etc., as human labor, but even the highest paying jobs also are being lost. So that's the problem that we see right now here. Then we also say that there are chances of existential risks, that the entire humanity can actually be wiped out. I mean, I know I'm talking about a very, very extreme case, but we know that there are these existential risks that actually can come in, not only in jobs, not only in your employment opportunities, but even on your existence. So that's the kind of problem that we are looking at today. And then lastly, it may even lead to moral degradation in the society. Now this is an interesting observation also in and after the covid and the post covid era that we are living in. So what we have seen is that a lot of things have gone online, the classes have gone online, a lot of work has gone online. So what happens is that in all these kind of cases, what we see is that because the direct human connection is missing in a lot of cases, you do not really have that kind of empathy or that kind of emotions for the other person. Whether you are talking on the phone, whether you are, let's say, even if you are connected to all your friends, even if you think that you are connected to all your friends, you perhaps are connected to them through WhatsApp, right? You have will probably have to count when was the last time that you met that person, but you are connected on WhatsApp. So through WhatsApp, through all these online platforms like classes and etc., we are just connected to the world virtually. Now in this particular scenario, your machine is more important to you than people around. You probably have more respect for the life of your machine than respect for the life of a person. If your mobile phone and a person both were falling from the roof, you probably will first catch your mobile phone and see the person fall. There's no guarantee what will happen. So that's the problem that we are looking at, that we are connected to our machines more, and we do not have the real human connection anymore. And everything is based on data, everything will be based on analysis and all these kind of things. And that is where the things are headed. So that is a problem. I mean, even if you go to a restaurant search on any platform like, let's say, Zomato, Swiggy, etc., whatever you might have used, you'll first see the rating. Probably you just put a filter of rating, 4 plus, 4.5 plus, and so on, and then you start the search. So so everything is data driven now. So you do not know what's good, what's not. Maybe something has which has not been rated well, has not been rated well because somebody else did not like it, but this is what you might have liked. But you would never know because you have put a filter, and those things do not even qualify as a part of your filter. So there are so many things, right? There are so many things that we are looking at. And everything, I mean, these classes are feedback based, that you will give a feedback to me, I probably would give a feedback to you. So everything is just based on feedback. So whether a faculty is teaching well or not will only be seen with the feedback rating that the faculty has, and that's the reality of the day. So there are all these things that we see, that all these things are happening. Now many a times there is a lot of subjectivity in all these things also, and that's why we are talking about this moral degradation, because we are not directly connected to the people around and the people you are working with, or your colleagues, etc., and that's why you probably do not have the same respect for them than you otherwise would have had. So that's why there are all these challenges that this technology also brings in, or AI also brings in. So we also have to be pretty aware of all these realities of today. So this is about this chapter. Any question if you have, please let me know. Demand of the machines used to get AI all are not equal. It makes demand, it is making demand in poor families. Yeah, you can say that. I mean, the technology is not feasible for everyone, and it's not easy for everyone to pay. So for example, let's say even if, let's say, you want to use Chat GPT or GPT-4 as the version is right now, I think you have to pay almost rupees 2000 per month. So the annual subscription is rupees 24,000. So it's a big uh, commitment, big subscription cost. So that's why not possible for everyone, only the people who can afford it. How subjectivity with respect to Chat GPT? Subjectivity comes in because there is no guarantee where the data has been taken from, where the answer has been taken from. So they just have analyzed a lot of websites and lot of data that has been fed into the system, and they are giving you the result based on that. So many a times it may not be the correct result, it might be the popular result, or it might be a result that has been taken from some of the most visited pages. So there are all these possibilities. Recently, one incident has happened. One deepfake video has gone viral of our Indian actor Rashmika Mandana. That's why our PM warns against deepfakes. Yes, of course. I think even yesterday, I think our Prime Minister said something about deepfakes, if I'm not wrong. So so that's why we understand all these problems, we understand about all these possibilities, that you would never even know what's correct and what's not, and these systems are only going to improve. We are still seeing the early days of the developments of these systems. You do not know what direction it can actually take. What is Elon Musk's view about AI? I mean, he has indicated that very soon it's just going to take over a lot of jobs and eat a lot of employment opportunities, and completely change the economy in a manner that until now we are not even in a position to comprehend. I didn't understand the point. Study of ancient literature on medicines. So basically, what we are saying is that when it comes to the ancient literature is very different. Even if you are saying that the same language existed, you'll see that the language also evolves. So the kind of, let's say, language that we were using, let's say if you take a classical language like Tamil, then Tamil, what was there 2000 years back compared to what you have today is different, because it also has evolved over time. So that classical Tamil is very different from the language of the day. So that's why we see that there are all these things that happen, and there are a lot of parts of the language that are lost over time. So that's why something that was written back then, today we do not even know how to comprehend them. So that's why this is where AI would also be useful in comprehending things that we haven't been able to. How to cover science and tech current affairs? Could you provide us integrated notes of science and tech and updated current affairs in one place? See, current affairs is something that will keep adding up every day. So that's why it's not something that stops with my class. Even after my class for the next 4 5 months, also, you'll have to keep adding to all this current affairs. Google search is also AI. It is also using AI. Yes, for sure. Deepfakes are part of AI or are they separate? No, absolutely a part of AI. It is a kind of AI where you are creating uh, fake videos. You are creating fake videos which are uh, created completely with the help of analyzing the face of somebody and putting all the data, various different ways in which that person emotes. How does the person emote when the person is happy or sad or emotional and otherwise? So all these things you'll do that, and on the basis of that the system will create a video out of it. How to use DALI site? You can simply go to chat gpt, you go to chat.openai.com. There you'll see that you'll get all those options to use different types of gpt. Difference between AI and chat gpt? It's not different. Chat gpt is a kind of generative AI, so it is a kind of artificial intelligence. How to earn using AI? There are a lot of ways. You become a content creator in one way or the other. Maybe ask AI to write song lyrics. The song lyrics will be ready for you. Then train it on the voice of some of the famous singers, good singers, and then use deepfake to show it as your voice. Done. You become a singer. I'm just joking. There are a lot of ways in which you can actually do it. Strong AI is dangerous. Yes, of course, it can be dangerous. When are we doing IT and communication? IT and communication will be done after these two chapters. After health diseases and vaccines will be one part, defense, and then after that we'll take IT and communication. So Monday. Can you tell me about the physics Ray Chaudhary? He made equations related to Einstein's equation. Yeah, it actually has been a long battle for him where he has made, I mean, when he had come out with the paper challenging those equations, and that's why there have been a lot of debates around. There are a lot of supporters of what he has been saying, and there are a lot of people who are saying that his hypothesis is not correctly placed. So there are a lot of discussions there. AI increases unemployment instead of employment. Now, see, saying this also is not correct. This is something that has happened earlier as well. So, for example, at the time of computers, when computers started to become a thing, so we saw that there was a lot of fear that computers will just take away all the jobs. That until now, wherever you needed people, now computer will do those things, and you will not need people for that. And that is what the job graph also shows, that if you see uh, the data for number of jobs versus year, so what you will see is that this data goes something like this, that it goes something like this, then there is a dip, and then it takes up like this. So this was the original flow, and then it just spiked. This was the year around 2000. So until 2000, the number of jobs were growing steadily. Now, this is where the computers were really being introduced everywhere. And we see that for the 2, 3 years, there was a drop in the number of jobs. But after this, because of the number of jobs computers actually created, we saw that the number of jobs, the graph of number of jobs just spiked. So there were a lot more employment opportunities that were created, which until now were unheard of, that you could not even think of. But it really created a complete new market out of uh, instead of just eating up the jobs. So that's why we can't really say what will happen. Will it change the nature of jobs? Absolutely, yes. It will change the nature of jobs. A lot of things which are completely manual and you can get a machine to do it, it will soon happen. But at the same time, what can also happen is that there are a lot of new avenues which are unheard of, which will open up now, and we'll see that the world perhaps will start to move in that direction, and maybe it creates a lot more new opportunities than we have seen until now. So we just have to wait and see what happens. ChatGPT failed UPSC prelims examination, uh, indicates its poor accuracy. Actually, it does not uh, indicate its poor accuracy, just that it did not have the current affairs information. If it had current affairs information, it would have done much better than it did. So for example, today I'm sure that if you ask ChatGPT to write your prelims examination, it will start doing much better than it did and how it became famous last time. So the things will change and things will keep on changing like this. Tomorrow no class is here. Tomorrow we don't have a class. After this we have the class on Monday. Tomorrow is the World Cup final also, and thankfully I don't have a class. From this chapter, mains questions will come. Yes, this year, 2023, there was a question. We'll discuss that later. There was a question. Yeah, tomorrow is Chhat Puja also, correct. So for those of you celebrating, happy Chhat Puja. All right, so let's move on to the next chapter, that is health and diseases. Now, the two chapters that we have here, health and diseases, vaccines being one, and defense being the second chapter. Now, these are two chapters which I'll say is these are purely current affairs based chapters. So, both of these chapters, so first being health, diseases, and I would even say vaccines, this being one, and the second one being defense. These two chapters are going to be current affairs based chapters, right? And that's why, more than what we are covering here, the basics that we are covering here, perhaps these basics will not be as important as the individual news articles that you will read related to these areas. And if you look at even the last 15, 20 years of question papers, you'll find that whenever the questions have come from these areas, they often have come in the context of current affairs. They have been asked only because they were in the news for one reason or the other. So that's why you have to be very mindful of this particular fact. And in this particular scenario, and I'll also take a couple of examples of where I feel that these topics in the coming year could be very, very important. So I'll take those examples also so that you have a better understanding of what's happening. So first and foremost, when it comes to health and diseases, understand what we mean by disease. So disease, we know that it is nothing but any malfunctioning process that interferes with the normal functioning of the body, correct? Anything that interferes with the normal functioning of the body will be called as a disease. Now here there can be two types of diseases. If you see this chart, there can be two types of diseases: congenital disease and acquired disease. Congenital diseases are the ones that are present since the birth. The child is born with this disease. So these are called as congenital diseases. On the other hand, we have acquired diseases. So acquired diseases are the ones which develop after birth. All right. These are the ones which develop after birth. So in this manner, what happens is that these can either be communicable or non-communicable diseases. So congenital diseases, for example, some kind of either maybe genetic disease that the child has been born with, or maybe it could be something else. It could be a precondition that the child was born with. So it could be something like that. For example, there are children who are born with some kind of small hole in the heart. So those kind of things are called as congenital, because that's a pre-existing condition in them. Now out of acquired, it can either be communicable or non-communicable. Communicable meaning that these can be transferred, that if I have it, maybe I can transfer it to the people who are living around me. So that will be called as communicable. It will spread from a diseased person to a healthy person. These communicable diseases, they are also called as infections. These are also called as infections. Now infection also is a term that many a times is misused, that we often use the term infection for a disease, that any kind of disease we just say infection. But always remember that infection is, medically infection is a term that should be used only with communicable diseases and not with anything else. Now in this particular scenario, these are infections, and then you have non-communicable diseases which will not spread. It will remain localized in the person who is suffering from that disease. So that is what we'll see in case of non-communicable diseases. So that's why they do not spread from a diseased person to a healthy person. Now in this particular scenario, we see that there are a lot of different types of non-communicable diseases. So that's why this is how we classify. All right, this is how we classify between congenital and acquired, and the division between acquired as communicable and non-communicable. Now often what you'll see is that communicable diseases are based on some kind of pathogens. They are caused by some kind of pathogens. So these are pathogen based diseases. Now pathogen based diseases, meaning that either a bacteria or a virus or something else would cause this disease. So that's what we call as communicable. Now in case of communicable diseases specifically, what we see is that it will spread, right? It can spread from one person, diseased person, to another, and it could be contaminated food, water contact, through insecticides, animals, etc. In all these cases it will be called as communicable. So that's why in this kind of a scenario, they would be caused by different causative agents which are called as pathogens. So pathogens could be microorganisms. They can be largely microbes. Let me not write microbes, otherwise you'll think that it's only microbes. These are, let's say, bacteria, virus, when protozoa. So all these different types of uh, organisms may act as a causative agent, and that will be called as a pathogen. So examples being hepatitis, measles, HIV, etc. They are all examples of communicable diseases. So communicable diseases can either have a direct or an indirect transmission. Direct transmission, when you're directly getting in contact with the disease. So for example, direct contact between infected person and the healthy person. So smallpox, chickenpox, syphilis, all these are examples of direct contact based diseases. Even in case of, let's say, when you come in direct contact with a COVID-19 patient, so there also we know that it's very easy for it to infect another healthy person as well. Then we have droplet infection, which happens because of some kind of tiny droplets in terms of mucus that is released when somebody coughs or sneezes, in all these cases. So We have seen that with COVID-19, and that is the reason why in case of COVID-19 we are all asked to wear a mask. Because wearing a mask, first of all, if you are infected, it will help you not spread the disease, and at the same time, if there are others who are diseased, this mask will protect you from them. So it goes two ways. So you should not infect and you should not be infected, and that is why these masks. So that's why we see that all these are droplet infections. Then after that, when it comes to uh, another way, it could also be contact with soil, often seen in small children, where the soil might be contaminated and they get in contact with it. Then also animal bite. Animal bite like rabies. In case of rabies, so what happens is that if a rabid animal, let's say a rabid dog, bites a person, then that person also can get infected with rabies. So that's why animal bite can also transfer the disease from the animal to the human. So all these are direct transmission methods. Then there could be indirect transmission methods. So for example, vectors. What are vectors? We had discussed this. Vectors are carriers, right? Vectors are carriers. So houseflies, mosquitoes, cockroaches, etc., they can become the carriers of the disease. Now this is where you have to understand it is different from animal bite, because in case of animal bite, it was direct contact because that animal already is infected with rabies, whereas houseflies or mosquitoes or cockroaches, they are not infected. So for example, let's say malaria or dengue or chikungunya, etc. So in all these kind of cases, the mosquito that is biting the person and leading to that person acquiring the disease, the mosquito is not infected. Mosquito is just carrying the virus or carrying the protozoa, and it is just delivering to you. And then that person, whoever it has been delivered to, can get affected. So that's why, remember why we are saying that this is indirect contact and that was direct contact, because there the animal was already infected. Here, these are not infected. Then it can be airborne, object borne, or waterborne. So airborne, when these are just suspended in the air, and the cyst probably is suspended in the air, and that would lead to a further complication. Then it can be object borne. So object borne meaning, or also called as fomite borne, that they might be residing on some surface, like for example clothes, utensils, toys, door handles, taps, etc. Now, this is where, in case of COVID-19, also we have seen something like this, right? In case of COVID-19, you were also asked to wear gloves when heading outside, because some surface or the other might have this kind of a scenario that maybe the virus is residing there. So, and different surfaces, we knew that on different surfaces, COVID-19 could last for different amount of time. On some surfaces, only for 2 or 3 hours, on some surfaces, for even for 10 hours. So, that's why we had to wear the gloves, etc. also. And then waterborne diseases. So, waterborne diseases such as cholera, diarrhea, hepatitis, jaundice, etc., they all are where we see that the water is contaminated with the pathogens which are causing these diseases. So that's why we see that in all these kind of cases, an indirect transmission is also possible. Now, coming to the non-communicable diseases, we see that there are all these diseases that are not generally related to any pathogen, but they are related more to other problems. Either it could be malfunctioning of a body organ, or it could also be about our lifestyle. And that's why today many of these diseases are also called as lifestyle diseases. Many of these are also called as lifestyle diseases. Now, why lifestyle diseases? Because an incorrect lifestyle or an improper lifestyle can cause these kind of issues. So that's why we are talking about lifestyle diseases, and many of them we have seen that a lot of these cases, whether it is blood pressure or whether it is about diabetes, and all these cases, we have seen that all these cases have been rising. All these cases have been rising even in the population that had never seen it. In the younger population, people who are 30 minus or 30 to 40 years of age, in these populations it was never seen. These were diseases that used to happen in people who are at least 50 plus years in most of the cases. So it was never heard of in people who are just 25, 26, 30, 35, and so on. But now we see that all these things have actually started showing up. In all these diseases have started showing up even in much younger population, and that's basically because of lifestyle. Whether it is about your lifestyle, your eating habits, sleeping habits, all these things can lead to these diseases. So that's why we have seen that a lot of these cases have started rising. But then there are other such cases also, which are, for example, cancer. Now cancer can also be a lifestyle disease, but there are a lot of unknown reasons for cancer too, and that is where cancer has become one of the most problematic unsolved diseases for us in for since we have known about cancers. Because we know about certain factors that can lead to cancer. For example, we know smoking can lead to lung cancer, tobacco can lead to cancer. So we know that these can become factors, that these can lead to cancer. But many a times it does not happen. Many a times, even if these factors are there, even then a certain person may not develop that cancer. So sometimes that's why predicting what will happen and whether it's an exact reason or not is different. And that's why I'm saying factors and not saying reasons, right? So that is why cancer becomes too dangerous and has been one of the most problematic unsolved diseases. Only certain cases, in certain limitations, we have had success against cancer. Otherwise we haven't seen any success. Now in this particular scenario also, what we see is that even when it comes to cancer, there are two types of cancers that develop. It could either be benign or it could be malignant. So it could either be benign cancer or malignant cancer. Now, benign is when this is a kind of cancer that remains localized. This is something that remains localized. Whereas malignant is something that spreads. Malignant is a kind of cancer that spreads, and benign is a kind of cancer that remains localized. And that is where we see that there's again benign cancer is relatively easier to solve, but malignant tumor, the one that spreads, because basically what happens in case of cancer is that there will be an uncontrolled growth of cells. So generally speaking, the cells will just keep on growing and they'll die and they'll be replaced with new cells. But in these cases, they'll keep growing, and not only the fact that they keep growing, they'll also uh, spread this to other cells, and that's where it starts to become very complicated. The cases become very complicated. So that is basically where we see that all these can actually happen, and cancer, that's why, is a disease that becomes pretty difficult to solve. Then there is osteoporosis, which is also called as a degenerative disease. We say that it is a degenerative disease. So degenerative disease basically are diseases which happen with age, right? Happens with old age, largely with old age, when organs start to malfunction. So that is basically what we have to understand in these kind of cases, that these are the ones which will happen when the organs start to malfunction with a certain age. So that's called as degenerative disease. So there are all these diseases which are non-communicable in nature. Now coming to a topic that now has started becoming very very important, and that is mental health. Now, until now, the focus always has been on the physical manifestation of diseases and trying to solve the problems of the physical diseases, whether communicable or non communicable. But what we have seen is that the mental health issues or the mental diseases, they are on a rise. The number of cases of mental problems, they have been on a rise. And at the same time, we see that it has led to a lot of complications, because mental health issues may not only lead to some kind of mental problems or mental disturbances. It can actually start showing up as physical manifestation of disease as well. It can actually start leading to some kind of disease. So that is where we have to understand that mental health and keeping good mental health, sound mental health in today's world is extremely important. So, first and foremost, when we say mental health, this is the definition that has been given by WHO about what mental health means. That it is defined as the state of well being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. So, it is not saying that there should be an absence of stress. It's just saying that yes, everybody would have stresses in life, but the person who is able to manage those stress and come out of those situations is having sound mental health. Now, what we see is that today there are a number of reasons that are leading to a rise in the number of cases of mental health problems. So, first and foremost, of course, are the lifestyle changing patterns, because ultimately we see that there are so many differences that have come in the lifestyle as compared to maybe the last generation, compared to what uh, habits we used to have maybe 10, 20 years back or 30 years back. We see that there's an immense change that has happened or that has come up in our habits, whether it is about living habits, sleeping habits, food habits, whatever it is. In all these cases, we see that there is an immense change that has come in, and that is leading to a lot of complications here. And it has been found to be one of the most important reasons for all these complications. Then, social stigma and discrimination can also lead to certain problems. Isolation of a person, etc., can also lead to certain problems. Even career, we have seen that it has been one of the ways in which the mental health issues has been rising. People not looking after themselves, just prioritizing work above life, forgetting about family, forgetting about the simplest of pleasures of life, and just running up around that work or running around that career has been one of the major problems as well. And then, of course, goes without saying, our extensive use of smartphones and the way we look at smartphones. I mean, the kind of love and respect that we have for our smartphones compared to the love and respect that we have probably for our family. So that also has been one of the issues. And with smartphones, it's not about the use of smartphones but how engaging it has become for us, because there is something that is there. I mean, it's an addiction, if not anything. uh, the way we handle ourselves, the way we handle, for example, our social media, that when you take a picture today, perhaps of anything, more than just capturing the beauty of the place, it perhaps, or beauty of the moment, is perhaps is about posting it on your Instagram or Facebook. So that is where the mindset has changed, that you see a good view, and you think that okay, if I have this picture, if I post it on Instagram, probably I'm going to get 1000 likes. And that is what your mind is thinking now. So, and now, what if you don't get 1000 likes and you get 10 likes? What happens then? Then you start to doubt everything. You start to doubt your existence, and it creates a lot of false sense of problems in your life. And that is where the things are bad, because social media is just a platform, and if you can detach yourself from there, great for you. But if you can't, then this is also something that can lead to a lot of problems. Then there are demographic and environmental determinants as well. The environmental determinants or demographic, depending on where you are living, what kind of population, what are the weather patterns, that a gloomy weather pattern is often associated with some of these issues, whereas bright sunny days are always seen to be better for mental health as well. So that's why we see that there are a lot of these uh, problems, and there are a lot of these things that are leading to these issues in today's life. Now, there are multiple different types of health disorders, but out of them, these are some of those mental health disorders which are the most commonly observed in the entire world: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, dementia, schizophrenia, and obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, out of all these, also, depression is the one that has been the most common. And in case of depression, the problem also is a kind of a misunderstanding between what is depression, versus what is sadness. That you could be sad because of some reason, you could be sad because of some reason, but saying that I'm depressed because of that reason is wrong. And unfortunately, many a times what we see is that a problem, a very severe problem like depression, is misunderstood as somebody just being sad, and we just try to cheer them up by just saying that, why are you depressed, be happy. So if it was possible for the person who is actually depressed to be happy, the person wouldn't choose to be depressed, correct? The person can choose to be sad because of something that happened, that I wanted South Africa to be in the final but Australia came in the final, I'm sad. But I cannot say that I'm depressed because of that, right? So that is where the problems are, that as a society we have a misunderstanding. We don't understand what actually depression means and what is sadness and how to differentiate between the two. For example, if I'm sad, it's a momentary phase and I'll come out of it. I'll maybe come out of it in a day, I'll maybe come out of it in a month, maybe in a few months. But if it is depression, then there's no guarantee that it will happen. Then it might take not only months or a couple of years, it might take a decade or so for somebody to even just keep living in that depressive phase, which is not good for the person. Because if you look at the data of suicides, you'll find that depression has been one of the biggest reasons for people committing suicides. So the things are so severe. There are medicines that people will have to take. They'll have to go on medication for uh, as antidepressants and take those medicines to be in a normal state. So those things can be that severe, and it should never be just compared to sadness. And that's why it's not only about the person uh, knowing about what is happening, because what we see is that there is a persistent depressed mood or loss of interest in activities. So it's not only about the person who is suffering to understand that what they're suffering from is depression, but it's also at the same time important for the people around to understand that it's not just sadness, but it is depression. That the person near me, my friend, my family member, is actually suffering from depression, and there is some role for me also to play to make sure that person can come out of that state. And we many a times see that friends and families actually have a big role to play in these kind of scenarios. And but in severe cases we do see that people might have to get professional help. Maybe they would have to go to therapy, maybe they'll have to visit a psychiatrist, and perhaps they would be asked to go through medication uh, to come back to a normal state. But those are severe cases. There are a lot of cases which are solvable, just that diagnosis is required. It is important for us to understand that this is what the scenario is, and first and foremost calling it out is very very important. Because one of the major problems uh, with depression, something like depression, is that people don't call it out. You first have to think of it as a disease. When do you take, let's say, a paracetamol? When you know that you have a fever, right? So you know that, okay, fine, and you call it as a fever. You just don't say that, okay, I'm just feeling cold. It's not fever. So it's not that you just try to quash it off. You try to call it as a disease, and then only uh, you are able to treat it as a disease. But ultimately what we see is that we many a times, because of the stigma associated with a lot of mental health issues, and our misunderstanding or less understanding of all these issues, we do not even call it as a disease, and that is where we start suffering. And that's why the first step itself is to call it out, to go out there and call it out as a disease. If required, getting help. If required, talking to people around, if at all that's possible. Sometimes the things can be as severe as situations where people are not even able to do that. So that's why first and foremost a better understanding is required in these kind of cases. Then we have anxiety disorder. So anxiety disorder is something which is characterized by feelings of worry, anxiety, or fear that are strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. Now again, this is something that we need to uh, understand, that everybody feels anxiety for momentarily, maybe. That, for example, for the first time that you'll go and start attempting your prelims paper, you'll obviously feel anxious. but for majority of you, that anxiety will last for like 2 minutes until you settle into the paper, and then it wouldn't. But for the people who have anxiety disorder, for them the things are not that simple. For them the things could be very severe at all. So the things can be that severe for them. And it could be a lot of cases, it could be a lot of triggers, it could be a lot of different scenarios because of which they actually are suffering from these situations. And again, there are exceptional cases, there are severe cases where a person might have to take anti-anxiety pills, the anxit pills for example. So there are all these kind of situations also. Then there is bipolar disorder. Now in case of bipolar disorder, we see that there are mood swings where the person might get in depressive moods or also manic highs. So it could be two extreme conditions sometimes in their scenario. Now in case of bipolar disorder, what we have observed is that bipolar disorder can be genetic. Bipolar disorder is something that can be genetic in nature also, that a person who is suffering from bipolar disorder, their children might also suffer from bipolar disorder. So we have seen that there are possibilities of these kind of scenarios as well. Then there's dementia. So dementia is a group of thinking and social symptoms that interfere with daily functioning, where we see that the person suffering from dementia, they start forgetting the basics of their life. They'll not remember their relations, they'll not remember their daily activities, and a lot of things that they can perhaps forget. So it's something that is often associated with very old age. We see that people who are older than largely 60s, 70s, and even 80s, they are the ones who are really suffering from these kind of diseases. Then there's schizophrenia. Now in this particular scenario, we see that it affects a person's ability to think, feel, and behave clearly. Now what happens is that they might start living in a delusion. Their mind creates fake scenarios for them many a times, and that's why they sometimes are not able to distinguish between what is reality and what is imaginary. So that can be very dangerous for that person in a lot of cases. So we see that, but schizophrenia is also one of the leading mental health disorders that has been observed. And then uh, we have something called as obsessive compulsive disorder. Now OCD in some form, a lot of people maybe in and around you, or maybe you are one of them who has them now. But uh, a normal form of OCD is not that bad because they are pretty manageable. But again, OCDs also can be very extreme at in cases, and that's why it can be very problematic for the person in certain cases. For example, let's say one of the most common OCDs in the world is the OCD to keep washing hands. And not, I'm not talking about today after COVID, but even before the COVID era, you'll find that the data says that washing hands is one of the most common OCDs, where the person always keeps thinking that there is some kind of germ, some kind of pathogen on their hands, and they'll keep washing the hand all the time. So it has been seen as one of the most common OCDs all across the world. So similarly, there are OCDs related to something or the other all the time, and everyone has it. Maybe it is about some kind of arrangement or in your life, maybe about your room, maybe about your eating habits, maybe about your routine. It could be anything, it could be smallest of the things, how you arrange things, etc. So that's why we see that in all these cases, we see that there are all these disorders. Now when it comes to these mental health disorders, today we see that the government also has been trying to take certain steps. Now one of the steps that has been launched last year is Telemanas, Telemanas helpline program. And this is something that was launched last year so that people can get professional help. People can get access to professional help also at a cheaper rate. Not only cheaper rate, but rather free of cost. So this is where we see that last year this was started, that there will be a helpline number. And if you want, if you think that you are facing some kind of an issue, you can always call up this number, and there will be some kind of mental health related guidance that will be available for you. So that is basically what they have started last year. So this year, the data, I mean, mid-year data says that there are a total of 42 functional cells that we have right now, and currently there are more than 1300 calls that they are receiving per day, and over total of over 2 lakh calls have been received since the time this service has been launched. So that's why overall we see that it is moving in a right direction, and I hope that it does move in a much better direction in this particular scenario. So that is what we have seen with this. Now the last topic of this chapter is drug resistance. Now drug resistance is also something that has been in the news for a while now. I mean, you can say that almost last 15 years, for one reason or the other, it has been in the news. Now, what exactly do we mean by drug resistance? First of all, drug resistance basically is nothing but the reduction in effectiveness of a medication, meaning that when a medicine does not have any effect on the disease that you are suffering with. And what we have seen is that this is something that is a growing problem. It's going growing problem, and it is going to become a big menace if not checked well. And we already see that there are some of uh, common diseases where drug resistance has been observed. For example, tuberculosis. In case of tuberculosis, there are two forms of tuberculosis that we have observed: MDR-TB and XDR-TB. MDR-TB and XDR-TB. So it has become one of the most common of the drug resistance cases in the world, where the normal medications that we take against tuberculosis is not effective at all. So when there is any kind of reduction in the effectiveness of medication, this is basically what we call as drug resistance. Now, when it comes to drug resistance, basically what happens is that something like a bacteria or a virus or a protozoa, a fungi, etc., they might develop some kind of resistance against the very medicine that is used on them. So once they start becoming resistant, this is where the medication will stop becoming effective at all. And that basically happens with evolution, because there is something that is working on them, something that is killing them, and they evolve so that they can bypass that. So that is basically what happens in case of drug resistance. Now overall, there are various reasons why the drug resistance cases have been increasing. Effectively, what happens is that first, let's say there might be certain drug resistant bacteria in the gut of a person, and let's say that person takes a medicine. So when that person takes a medicine, the normal bacteria would be killed, but the ones which are drug resistant, they will survive, and now they will start to grow, they will start to multiply, they'll start increasing in their number. And at the same time, we see that their properties of being drug resistant will also keep on transferring to other pathogens as well. So that is basically what happens in a typical case of drug resistance, and how the number of these bacteria or the number of these pathogens will keep on increasing. So that kind of scenario then becomes very dangerous. Now there are multiple different pathways, there are multiple reasons to why certain situation like this has been created. So for example, let's say when it comes to the spread, there could be, let's say, a person who already has drug resistant pathogens in the gut, and because this person lives in a community with family, friends, etc., there are chances that the person will transmit it to others who are living with the person. Now see, drug resistant bacteria being there in the system does not mean that the person is suffering from a disease. It does not mean that there is some kind of disease. We are just saying that those properties are present in the bacteria or the virus, etc., that are present in the body. Now they may transfer it to others, to other pathogens, and make the situation more complicated. But it necessarily does not mean that there is some kind of disease that they are suffering with. Just that these bacteria are present, and in future they might cause problems. Right now they are not. So because the person lives in a community, it will keep spreading from one person to another, uh, through friends and family. And maybe, let's say, if this person visits a hospital, then in hospital obviously you have a lot of patients whose systems are not working well, and already immune system is trying to fight a lot, and they do not have a room to fight something new. And that's why, when in these kind of cases, if the patients get exposed to drug resistant bacteria or other pathogens, then the complications are pretty severe, could be pretty severe. Now that's why these kind of situations can arise. So that is one, that a person might spread it. On the other hand, it might also happen through animals, especially the farm animals, the animals which we are using either in the farms, maybe for plowing the field, etc., or maybe the poultry where they are uh, being used in the meat industry. Now what happens with animals, with our cattle, with our livestock, is that many a times they are given a higher dosage of antibiotics, etc., as compared to what they need. So if they need one tablet a day, they are given two tablets a day, because who cares? You just think that, okay, fine, if there is an extra amount that I'm giving, it's better for them that you'll give them more. But that extra amount is very detrimental for their health, first and foremost. And secondly, that extra amount leads to faster growth of antibiotic resistant. And that's why then the bacteria or other pathogens that are exposed to these higher dosage, they will start to develop some kind of resistance, and ultimately they will start growing easily in these livestock. So what then happens is that, maybe let's say somebody is consuming their meat without cooking them well, or maybe through the feces of these animals, what happens is that these bacteria will just keep on mixing with soil and water, or maybe directly comes in contact. So in all these kind of cases, we see that these are situations where antibiotic resistance might rise. Apart Now, one of the most common problems in the rise of these kind of situations has been the overuse of drugs. One has been overuse of drugs, and second has been wrong medication, and sometimes also underuse of drugs. So overuse of drugs, underuse of drugs, or sometimes wrong medication. Now what happens is that, let's say you have been asked to take a medicine, all right? You have been asked, let's say you have certain symptoms, you go to a doctor, and doctor says that, okay, fine, you have to take one tablet in the morning, one in the evening, and take it for the next 5 days. So a total of 10 tablets have been given to you. Now what happens is that on the second day, you see that the symptoms of the disease are gone. So you think that you are good, you have been cured. So third day onwards, you stop taking the medicine, thinking that now, why do you want to take it, because you already are cured. But these are the cases where these problems start to rise, or the complications start to rise. Because what may have happened is that the disease or the pathogen that was growing inside your body has not been killed, but rather they have become inactive, they have become dormant, because of the attack of the medicine. Maybe in the next 3 days they would have been killed and flushed out of your system, but you haven't given that time. Now what happens is that they have been brought down by the medicine, by the action of the medicine, but they haven't died. So now the next step would be that they know what could have killed them, and they start to grow further. They start to develop a resistance against these kind of scenarios, and this is how uh, underuse of drug can actually lead to these complications. Then of course there is an overuse of drugs, that you have been asked to take it only for 3 days, but you think that, we're fine, let me take as a precaution for the fourth, fifth, and sixth day as well. That can be equally dangerous. So that's why medication should be, or with uh, prescription, it should be on the suggestion of, or the instruction of the doctor, because this is where wrong medication comes in. So one thing is that you went to the doctor at least and you asked for help and they gave you a prescription and you bought the medicines based on those prescriptions. The other problem is how we all start becoming doctors and we take our own decisions. That okay, fine, see that my temperature is rising, I'm getting a fever, Dolo 650. So I'll go for Dolo 650 or any paracetamol and I'll be cured. I did not even bother to go to a doctor or consult somebody who has a knowledge. And instead, I either took my own decision or maybe I just called up a friend that look, these are the symptoms. Tell me the medicine. And I think we all have that friend who knows ins and outs of the medicine without being a doctor. And that friend will tell you, okay, this symptom, that medicine. At the same time, another problem could even be that, so that's there, or maybe you just go to Google and Google has remedy for everything. You type the symptoms and Google will tell you that it is cancer. So and you need to take the medicine for it. But jokes aside, we know that these are big problems. Not only that, sometimes you may even go to a pharmacy outlet and tell them that look, these are the symptoms, and they'll give you the medicine. They are experienced, they have seen so many uh, uh, prescriptions and so many people coming to them. It's just like if you go to a bookshop in Delhi and tell them that you are starting to prepare for civil services examination from today, they'll give you the set of books that go study this, rank 1. So all these are also issues that whether it is misuse of medicines or wrong medication, underuse of drugs, overuse of drugs, all these can cause problems because ultimately you are wrongly exposing some kind of pathogen to the medicine. Either you are under using the medicine, overusing it, or wrong medication. That fever would have happened because of a virus, let's say because of bacteria, and you have taken an antiviral. You just ate an antiviral for a bacterial disease without consulting anyone, without actually knowing what has happened. So obviously, a 2-minute search on Google cannot be a replacement for a person who has first studied medicine for 5 years, gotten the MBBS degree, and then has been practicing for perhaps 10 more years. So 15 years of experience cannot be supplemented by a 2-minute search on Google or just a phone call to a friend. So you have to understand the complications that may increase here. And that is what we have seen, that the complications have been increasing. And that's why the government now has started something called as the red line campaign. The red line campaign basically is where the medicines will come with a red vertical line, and this line basically means that these are medicines which should not be taken without any prescriptions. All right, these are the ones which should not be taken without prescription. So these should not be taken without valid prescription. So that's why these things have to be kept in mind, that it does not lead to these kind of complications at all. So that's why this campaign was started by the government, so that people should be aware that if this line exists, don't just take that medicine without any uh, prescription from a doctor. Then after that we see that there are a lot of things. For example, better decisions, informed decisions are very very important. Educating the population, whether it is about patients or people in general, they need to know better, they need to understand better. And even for the prescribers and dispensers, to make them realize their responsibility in this particular manner, it all becomes very very crucial in all these situations, because the numbers have been rising. And that's why we see that there are a lot of things that are being done. For example, revision of antibiotic protocol by WHO, where we see that they have classified all the antibiotics into three categories: access, watch, and reserve. Access category are the commonly used active antibiotics, where the chances of drug resistance developing from there is bare minimum. You can say impossible. Then you have the watch category, where we are talking about slightly more potent drugs, which there are where there are possibilities of uh, drug resistance. So these should not be taken These are not to be taken without prescription. And then lastly, we have the reserve category, where they have to be used only as the last resort. They are also called as last mile drugs. They are called as last mile drugs. So they are called as last mile drugs because they have to be taken only when nothing else works. When nothing else works, then they have to be taken. Otherwise, because they have a lot of chances. I mean, there are a lot of chances of them having side effects, severe side effects, damaging some kind of body organ. So that's why, unless and until required, they should not be taken. So that's why this categorization also has been done, so that they can try and curb these kind of situations, because we see that there has been a significant rise in these numbers in the past few years. So this chapter, as I told you, is more about current affairs, but these basics will form the crux of everything that you will also come across in current affairs. So that's why these things were needed. Some couple of topics like drug resistance and mental health especially will be very, very important, I believe, in the upcoming examinations. Right, so let's take a break here. It's almost 7 o'clock. And any questions that you have, you can keep posting all your questions, and after the break, when we are back, I'll take your questions first, and then we shall move forward. So let me, this is 6:58, so please don't take more than 15 minutes. Please be back. Welcome back, everyone. I'm not understanding how antibiotic resistance happens. So, antibiotic resistance, just know this, that we are talking about pathogens which are organisms, and whatever is affecting them, whatever is killing their population, they'll always evolve against it, right? So that's what's happening here, and they are evolving in a manner that the medicines are not able to kill them. And when the medicines are not able to kill them, this is where antibiotic resistance starts to develop. How AI impacts construction industry. So in the construction industry, AI impact, I mean, it will have a positive impact because you'll be able to get better results about the analysis of the material, the strength of the material that we are using, and that will be able to give you better results with regards to not only the longevity of the construction sites, but at the same time also in doing that in a cost effective manner. It will also have an impact on the operations of everything that you're doing. So each and everything indirectly will have an impact on it. Bipolar disease, once again, especially what manic highs. So manic highs is when the person is in a very excited state, looking very happy, very chirpy, etc. So that will be the manic high state, you can say. Or it may not be, I mean, not always a happy state, but very excited state. So there's a basic difference there. And so that will be happening at some times, and sometimes it will be drastically opposite of that, and will be a very depressed, sad state that the person might remain in. So that is a symptom that it could be bipolar disorder. Is Bing using chat GPT 4? Yes, it is. Today I have bought medicine for teeth problem. Behind the medicine packet there are four red lines. How do I understand? Is it campaigned by the government? So basically, the red vertical line, if you are seeing there, then it means that it has to be a prescribed medicine, and it might be for some kind of disease which can develop into further complications, and that's why, as a precaution, they would say this. When the person takes overuse of drugs, then they die or not, or affect the body. So uh, always it doesn't, so depends on the kind of medicine that the person is taking. Something that is, let's say, a medicine which has a very severe impact on the body, that should never be overdosed, because that can really be dangerous for life. But if it is a normal medicine, then overuse may not lead to the death, but still it might impact negatively some of the body organs. Can AI decipher ancient scripts? We have been trying, we haven't succeeded. What are vector borne diseases? Vector borne diseases, vector basically means carrier. So the ones which are carried by the carriers from one place to another. What are MDR and XDR TB? MDR and XDR TB, basically MDR stands for multi drug resistant TB. So these are the variants of tuberculosis that are not responding to, or which are resistant to multiple different drugs or multiple different medications that are tried in case of uh, tuberculosis. Alzheimer's comes under what category? What kind of disease is this? Alzheimer's also will come under some kind of medical disorder only. Can we say that all waterborne diseases are communicable diseases? Yes, they are. You can say that because they are being transferred because of that. So there is some kind of transfer that is happening. So that's why. Are vector-borne diseases microbial diseases or communicable diseases? Both, because they are being caused by some kind of bacteria, pathogen, protozoa, or virus, and they are communicable at the same time. So both. PPT. Many of you have written about the PPT. You haven't received the PPT, is it? Can you tell me if you have this PPT? Okay. Just give me then. Can you just wait for 2 3 minutes? I'll just go outside and check with the people of the support team whether they've uploaded the PPT or not. Just give me 2 3 minutes. I've asked them to upload it here in the chat. I hope that this will happen very soon. Which AI can be used for writing essays? You can use Chat GPT if you want. It's very simple to use it. It will give you, at least it will give you all the points. Even if you want, you can make it write your own essay also. But it can at least give you all the important points that you can use in a particular essay. Right. So let's move on. Hmm, okay. So next topic for us is vaccines. Now, with regards to vaccines, I would say that this is a topic that has become important recently after COVID or during COVID. This is something that, as a topic, has become important. Last few years, we have seen that questions on and off have been coming from vaccines, sometimes in prelims, sometimes in mains. So we need to know some of the basics related to vaccines and not going beyond that. So first and foremost, I want you to answer me that if I use two words, one being vaccine and one being medicine, can you tell me what is the difference between a vaccine and a medicine? What is a medicine and what is a vaccine? Yeah, Vashna, you have given the correct answer. Abhijit, correct. Chandrasekhar, correct. Nagintran, correct. Many of you are also giving wrong answers, but I'll give you a very basic difference. Yeah, Sai Dinesh, you are correct. Ravi, good point. Akansha, correct. Hmm. So let me give you a very simple definition about what medicine does and what vaccine does. Medicine is supposed to cure a disease. Medicine is supposed to cure a disease and vaccine is supposed to prevent. That's the basic difference. Vaccine is supposed to prevent, medicine is supposed to cure. Meaning that if you're suffering from a disease, then what you take is a vaccine. Sorry, when you're suffering from a disease, then when you take is a medicine. But when you want to prevent a certain disease, then you take a vaccine. So let's say if you have already fallen ill, then you don't take a vaccine. It is not going to help. It's going to help you in future. All right, vaccine will help you in future, whereas medicine will help you cure the disease at present. So that is the basic difference between a medicine and a vaccine. And largely vaccines will be taken against diseases that cannot be cured, or curing them can be very difficult and they can become fatal. In these kind of cases only we see that vaccines will be given and not a medicine. So that is where we see that it's not that you cannot make vaccines for simple diseases of the day also. I mean, for example, viral flu that on and off keeps happening. So it's not that you can't make vaccines against it, you can, but it does not lead to severe complications. It does not lead to death of a person. uh, in extreme cases it might, but it doesn't. In most of the cases, in 99.9% of the cases, it doesn't. So these are things that you can simply, with one tablet or maybe a dose of 5 days, you can cure the disease with the medicine. So we don't take vaccines for them. But for the problems that cannot be solved, or they can become fatal, the chances of fatalities are very high. In those cases we try to take vaccines. For example, COVID-19, where you do not have a medicine that works quickly as a cure. You try to solve for all the symptoms that you have, but you do not really solve that disease. So that, and it can become fatal, and we all know the kind of devastation it has caused. So that is where vaccine, because vaccine will help you prevent it from happening in the first place. So that is the basic difference between a medicine and a vaccine. Now, in case of medicine and vaccine, uh, when we come to the basic understanding of what vaccine is, we say that it is suspension of weakened, killed, fragmented, or microorganisms, or toxins, or antibodies, or lymphocytes that are administered primarily to prevent a disease. All right. So let's try to understand what exactly this vaccine is. So vaccine either would be made of a microorganism, and in this case it will perhaps be the same microorganism as what is causing the disease, or very similar in structure, in structure to what is causing the disease. For example, the virus that has been used in some of the vaccines against COVID-19 are also from coronavirus family, because they are very similar in structure. They are not exactly the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but something which is very similar in its structure to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So we see that many a times these kind of microorganisms, which are very similar in their appearance, in their structure, they might be used. Or we might use some kind of chemical, some kind of toxin, or maybe some kind of antibodies, etc. So these will be used for making the vaccine. Now, when we make the vaccines, they act as pathogen imposters, meaning that they try to mimic the pathogen. They try. to mimic the pathogen. They try to mimic the pathogen. So then in that case, what we basically say is that they will work in a manner that they look to be very similar to what the actual pathogen is. Now, looking like this pathogen, how does it help? How does it help that this looks like a twin of the pathogen, although it's not the same pathogen? Maybe even if it is the same pathogen, you already have killed it before you are inserting it in the body. Then how does it help? And this is where we need to understand how the vaccines work. All right, the working of vaccine. So just understand the entire story of what happens here. So when we deliver the vaccine, so these particles that you see which are being delivered by the vaccines, these are called as antigens. These are called as antigens. Now these antigens are delivered in the body. Now what is this antigen? It could be that microorganism, it could be a toxin, it could be an antibody, it could be a lymphocyte, it could be something else. All right, so anything. So an antigen basically will be delivered to the body. Now what do we mean by antigens? Antigens, I'll just write here, antigens, simply you can say that anything against which the body, or rather let me write immune system instead of body, the immune system launches an attack. Right, so that will be called as an antigen. So we have antigens in our body. Now these antigens, once these antigens are delivered to the body, this is where what we see is that first and foremost there are something called as antigen presenting cells which will come in contact with these antigens. And as they come in contact with the antigens, this is where these antigen presenting cells will make the antigens stick to the body of these antigen presenting cells. So these are the first responders. These will be the first ones to come in contact with the antigens. It's just like, let's say, you have the mobile police units which keep uh, roaming around the city at night, so that if there is anyone, any crime, any criminal anywhere, they can catch hold of them. Or let's say the night guards in the buildings, so they will just keep roaming around the building to find if something bad is somebody is planning something bad, or some criminal is trying to come to this building. So then in this particular scenario, in this particular scenario, antigen presenting cells basically will be the ones to catch hold of these antigens. All right, so that's the role of antigen presenting cells. Now these antigen presenting cells will simply make these antigens stick to the body. All right, stick to the body of uh, themselves, right? So the antigen simply comes and sticks to the body of antigen presenting cells. So what happens is, step one would be antigens delivered. I'll write it in the next page itself. We'll get the entire story. Step one is antigens delivered with the vaccine. Step two is antigens stick to the body of antigen presenting cells. All right, antigen presenting cells. So this happens next, that they stick to the body of antigen presenting cells, Now these antigen presenting cells, they have caught hold of the thief, right? They've caught hold of the thief. Now they'll call upon everyone. Now they'll report it to the headquarters, you can say. So now the reporting to the headquarter basically is the T helper cell. So now it has been taken to the police station, let's say. It has been taken to the police station, which is the T helper cell. Now T helper cell, depending on the kind of antigen that it sees, it will call upon the B cells and the T cells. It will call upon the B cells and the T cells. So now what happens is, so basically you have taken it to the police station. The police station will decide where to send this criminal. So the B cells and the T cells come next in touch with the antigens. So this is basically the next step. The next step is that APCs take the antigens to helper cells. Helper cells activate B cells and T cells. Right? Helper cells would activate the B cells and the T cells. Now the role of the B cells is to analyze this antigen. All right, they would analyze this antigen and they would produce something called as antibodies against these antigens. Now these antibodies basically are proteins. Most of the times you'll see that these are proteins which are produced, and these proteins simply, just you can say in a manner, they are like lock and key. That this antigen is like the lock, and antibody is the key that will just go and fix against this lock. It will fit into this lock. So that's why these antibodies will be produced next by the plasma B cells, by the B cells, you can say in simple terms. So these B cells will produce antibodies in thousands to lakhs in numbers. And as you can see, that these antibodies will simply go and completely surround the antigens. All right, antigens will be completely surrounded by the antibodies. So in a manner you can say that the B cells are like the locksmiths, that you have gone with the lock and they are trying to figure out what is the perfect key for this lock. And that is the role of the B cell. And B cell will simply make all these antibodies, which will simply go and cover this entire antigen. So that's the next step. So next step is that the B cells analyze the antigens. B cells analyze the antigens and produce antibodies. So what are antibodies? I'll write about antibodies here itself. We have antibodies. So antibodies basically are proteins that are produced by B cells against antigens. All right, so this is basically the next thing, that we see that the antibodies are produced, and antibodies are produced on the basis of the kind of antigen that you have. So depending on the kind of antigen, accordingly antibody, just as I said that B cells are like the locksmiths. B cells are like the locksmiths, and they'll basically uh, produce antibodies according to the antigen. Then antibodies are produced in thousands to lakhs in number. Thousands to lakhs in number, they would completely surround the antibody antigens. All right. So this has happened until now. This has happened until now, that antibodies have been produced by the B cells and they completely surround this antigen. They completely surround this antigen. Now comes the role of the killer T cells. Now these killer T cells are like assassins. All right, these are like assassins, and they would simply be looking for the mark, and their mark would be any antigen that has been surrounded completely by antibodies. And they have one simple role, that anything that they see surrounded by antibodies, they simply have to go and destroy it. And this is precisely what they do, that they will see these antigens surrounded by antibodies, and they'll go and they will simply destroy all these infected cells. They'll just go and destroy if all these cells that have been marked by the antibodies. So that's why we see that antibodies, the killer T cells will come next in the picture. So next we have the killer T cells destroy the antigens marked, or rather surrounded, by the antibodies, right? So this is the role of the killer T cells. So what has happened effectively until now is that the antigens that had entered the body, they have been destroyed, right? They have been destroyed. Then the question arises that if they have been destroyed, how does it help? I mean, antigen was actually the vaccine. The vaccine that was delivered to the body, it has been destroyed by the action of our immune system. Then how does it help in the future? How does it help us prevent the disease? Any idea, anyone? How does it help? Everything has been destroyed. So how does it help? Yeah, Abhijit, you are correct. Ravi, you are correct. Chandrasekhar, correct. Vimal, correct. Ananya, correct. Right. So many of you are giving the correct answer, that there are memory cells that are created. All right. There are memory cells created, and these memory cells basically are the memory of everything that happened, a documentation of everything that happened, a video recording, let's say, of everything that happened. So now in the future, it can use it again. Now, what has basically happened is that the immune system saw or understood how to kill this kind of an antigen. Now, this antigen, as I told you, that the vaccine antigen would have been made of a virus or some kind of pathogen which is very close in its structure to the original pathogen, to the pathogen that is causing the disease. So that's why now that this pathogen enters the body, the actual pathogen enters the body already knows, the immune system already knows, it has been through this process once while destroying the vaccine antigens. It has been through the process once, and now it is having a very clear idea of what to do. It has a very clear idea now about what to do, and precisely we'll see that that will happen, that in the future, if at all the actual pathogen enters the body is already ready, the immune system is already ready. If, let's say, it did not know how to fight, then it might have taken some time to figure out, and that time could have been detrimental, that time could have been dangerous for the survival of the person. So this is where we see that this memory cell creation has a very, very important role to play. That in a manner, it is nothing but the documentation of the entire journey, documentation of the entire process, and it helps in future. So next thing is memory helper cells, memory B cells, and memory killer T cells are created. These cells have the memory of the entire process used to destroy the antigen. So that's why in future, if the actual pathogen enters the body, the immune system would be ready, and thus destroy the pathogen very swiftly. So this is the entire process. All right, this is the entire process of what happens when it comes to this. So that's why you have the memory cells. So what happens is that when the pathogen actually enters, so when the pathogen actually enters the body, again antigen presenting cells will come. Now they would analyze, they would understand that this is similar to what the vaccine pathogen or vaccine antigen was. So they'll call upon the memory helper T cells, they'll call upon the memory B cells and memory killer T cells, and they'll make the antibodies this time very quickly. Pathogen will be completely surrounded by the antibodies, and the pathogens will be destroyed. And in this manner we see that these memory cells will help in the future. So that is what these vaccines do. That's why we say that they mimic the pathogen, they mimic the pathogen so that the body is ready, the body or the immune system is ready, and the immune system has already seen how to work against a certain pathogen. So that's the entire process of how the vaccines work. Now based on this, there are various different types of vaccines. The first one is called as the whole pathogen vaccine. Now, when we say whole pathogen vaccine, obviously it means that this is where you use the whole pathogen. So that's where the whole pathogen vaccine, the entire pathogen is being used, dead or alive. So it could be dead, it could be alive. If it is dead, then in that case it is called as inactivated vaccine. And if it is alive, then it is called as live attenuated vaccine. Now, alive does not mean that you will have a normal functioning pathogen and you will make it enter the body. That can be dangerous for the body. So, what we do is that we make it very dormant, we make it very inactive, and then we make it enter the body. So, it has not been killed, but it has been thoroughly weakened. So, it's a weakened form of the pathogen, or a uh, similar microbe or similar structure of the virus or bacteria. So either it has been killed already before inserting inside the body, or it has been weakened a lot and then it has been made to enter the body. So in these cases, these are called as whole pathogen vaccines because the entire pathogen is being delivered to the body. Then after that, you have the subunit vaccines, and subunit vaccines are vaccines where some part is used, some part of the pathogen, some part of the toxin. So that's why these are called as subunit vaccines. Not very important examination perspective, subunit vaccines may not be very important. Then we have nucleic acid vaccines. So nucleic acid vaccines are the ones where some kind of genetic material is inserted inside the body. When some kind of genetic material is inserted inside the body, then in that case these are called as nucleic acid vaccines. So just to give you an example, so so before just I'll just write here itself first. So when it comes to whole pathogen vaccine, it means that the entire pathogen, the entire pathogen used as an antigen. Subunit vaccine when a part of the pathogen or toxin is used. And then we have this nucleic acid vaccine where we have some form of genetic material is used. All right. So that's why these are some of the vaccines. Now, before going into some of the important vaccines, just read this question. I know that I have not discussed this, but you should still know the answer because of certain discussions that we have already done. Just read the question and tell me what you think the answer is. I'll launch the poll also for you. Please mark your answers. Wonderful. So 73% of you have given the correct answer. So let me just discuss this with you once. With reference to recent developments regarding recombinant vector vaccines, consider the following statements. First, genetic engineering is applied in the development of these vaccines. And second, bacteria and viruses are used as vectors. Now, I know that we have not discussed what are recombinant vector vaccines, but let's look at the words that we have here. Recombinant. Where did we see this word recombinant? Where did we see this word recombinant? In biotechnology, right? In discussing what in biotechnology? While discussing what in biotechnology did we come across this word? Yes, transgenic plants. Correct? In recombinant DNA technology. If you remember, we discussed that in producing transgenic plants, we have recombinant DNA technology. So, what was this recombinant? Recombinant was combination of two genes that we were doing artificially. So, it is genetic engineering, correct? It is a form of genetic engineering. So, that's the first sentence. Genetic engineering is applied in the development of these vaccines. So, recombinant word says that. Then, second term is vector. So this is where we had discussed about two genes combining. Now, what is vector? That also we had discussed in recombinant DNA technology itself. Yes, the carrier, correct. And what did we study about the carrier? Who can be the carrier? We had discussed that either the carrier is virus or the carrier is bacteria, right? It could be virus, it could be bacteria, correct. Look at the second statement. Bacteria and viruses are used as vectors, correct. So without even knowing what is recombinant vector vaccine, you can still mark the answer. That answer should be both 1 and 2. So anyway, coming to all these important vaccines, the first one is inactivated vaccine. Now, inactivated vaccine is where we are using the killed version of the germ. So that causes the disease. So basically, what we are seeing is that in case of inactivated vaccine, we first kill that pathogen or whatever we are using as an antigen. We first kill that life form, and then it is inserted through an injection or anything. Then it is injected inside our body. And we see that there have been a lot of cases in the past, apart from COVID-19 also, where we have made the use of inactivated vaccines. Now, this time, in case of COVID-19, the inactivated vaccine that we used was Covaxin. Covaxin basically is an inactivated vaccine, the one that was made in India. So, that is an inactivated vaccine that we used against COVID-19. Then, after that, there is live attenuated vaccines. So, these are the ones which are weakened. So we make it very weak, very dormant, very inactive, and then it is inserted inside the body. That's why there will be no complication. They'll not cause any disease in our body. So that is how we make the use of live attenuated vaccines. So where the pathogen that is being inserted already has been weakened, it has been made very dormant. So again, there have been a lot of cases in the past against which we have made the use of live attenuated vaccine. And in terms of what we used against COVID-19, the Covishield vaccine. The Covishield vaccine was, or is rather, a live attenuated vaccine. All right. So that's why we see that these are being used against COVID-19. Then there are mRNA vaccines. Now, mRNA stands for messenger RNA. Now, messenger RNA basically is something that uh, carries the information or carries the instructions for making proteins in our body. All right. For making the proteins in our body, we see that messenger RNAs are there in the body. Now, in this particular scenario, when it comes to messenger RNA, what we see is that messenger RNA becomes very, very crucial part of protein synthesis in the body, or you can say any part of the cell. Most of the cell parts are actually made by, or the instructions are there in the messenger RNA. So we, for the first time, when we made a vaccine against COVID-19 using mRNA, this technique has been used for the first time. So it hasn't been used in the past. As we saw in case of live attenuated vaccines or inactivated vaccines, they have been used multiple times in the past. But mRNA as a carrier has never been used. So now in this particular scenario, what they do is that mRNA will be injected inside the body. All right. mRNA will be injected inside the body, and when they reach inside the body, they'll start making the proteins which act as antigens. So inside the body, they'll make these proteins that act as antigens, and hence they will help in uh, again triggering that entire process that we just discussed. So this is what happens in mRNA vaccines. So here mRNA is injected inside the body. It starts making proteins in the body, that act as antigens. So that's why this time we are not injecting the antigen to the body. Instead, we are injecting mRNA, and this mRNA will convert or start synthesizing proteins once they are inside the body. So this is basically what will happen in this particular scenario. That this is mRNA. Yeah. So this is what will happen in this particular scenario. Now, in case of mRNA vaccines, two very common vaccines which have been used in the US and Europe, one by Pfizer and one by Moderna. These have been mRNA vaccines, largely used in European countries and the US. Then after that, we have the recombinant vector vaccines. So recombinant vector vaccines, basically, they would use different viruses as vector to deliver the protein, to deliver the protein, or the protein that is there in the vaccine, which will provide the protection. Now here what happens is that in case of in case of recombinant vector vaccines, there could be two different viral vectors. All right, there could be two different viruses that could be used together. So genes from two different viruses. Now again, this is also something that has been done for the first time against COVID-19, that viral vectors were used against COVID-19, and they were able to make this particular vaccine. So the Russian vaccine that goes by the name Sputnik, the Sputnik V vaccine, is an example of recombinant vector vaccine. So that's why we have seen that even this as a process has been used for the first time against COVID-19. Now, apart from that, there is a DNA vaccine that also has been developed, and this is the Zykov D. Now, this is very, very important because this is for the first time that a plasmid DNA vaccine has been used. So, until now, there is no DNA vaccine that ever has been used or ever has been made for the first time, made by anyone. So, this basically is for the first time that it has been made in India. So it becomes the world's first DNA plasmid which has been produced by the Zykov Cadla in India. So developed in India, first of the world. So it was the first DNA vaccine of the world that has been made in India. Now this is something which is very, very important vaccine, and this is important because of the way in which it delivers the vaccine with the help of something called as pharmajet. Now these are vaccines which do not use injections. These are vaccines which do not use injections. So for example, if you have heard about the nasal vaccine, if you have heard about the nasal vaccine, so nasal vaccines, basically they do not use uh, injections. That is what we are doing here, that we are not using injections, and by doing that we are trying to, this will help us counter vaccine hesitancy. All right, it will help us in countering vaccine hesitancy. So vaccine hesitancy is when somebody does not want to get vaccinated because of some kind of problem. Maybe they are afraid of injections. One of the biggest reasons why somebody does not want to take a vaccine is injection itself. So because they are afraid of the injection. I see some of you raising hands in the chat. So there are people who are afraid of injections, and that's why they don't want to get vaccinated. And that's basically how we see that this vaccine hesitancy acts. And to counter vaccine hesitancy, we have these kind of medicines, sorry, these kind of vaccines which do not use injections at all. So that's what we are doing in this particular case. So that's why this vaccine specifically becomes very important. Now, one more thing to understand is about the components of the vaccines. That vaccine, yes, it has that antigen that we talked about, but it's not only that antigen that it has. There are other things apart from those antigens that the vaccine has. And that is where we see that understanding in one line about what all does the vaccine have also becomes important. So first, there are some preservatives. So these preservatives will prevent the vaccine from becoming contaminated. So they will prevent contamination. Then after that, there will be some chemicals that will act as stabilizers, and they will help in preventing the chemical reactions from occurring within the vaccine. So one saves from contamination, second helps from any kind of chemical reaction from happening inside the vaccine. Then after that, we have surfactants. So surfactants are basically ingredients that keep all the sorry they are materials which keep all the ingredients together in this vaccine, so that they should not form their own phases, they should not form their own layers, they should all be mixed together well, so that they can have a positive impact. So that is what we have in surfactants. Then there could be certain residuals. So residuals basically are the substances that have been used during manufacturing, not useful anymore. All right, they are not going to have any positive or negative impact, just that they are there. So they are called as residuals. Then we have the diluent. So diluent will help in diluting the vaccine to a correct concentration. It will be like water, for example. You might have seen that vaccines are liquid in state in most of the cases, correct? So why are they liquid? Because there is a diluent which has been used, where it acts like a solvent, so that all the parts of the vaccine, all the different types of components of the vaccine, they can be mixed together properly in this diluent. So that's why we see that diluent will be used. And then finally, a very, very important part of a vaccine is adjuvant. Now, the role of the adjuvant is to instigate the immune response, to get the immune response from the immune system. Now, sometimes, let's say, in the absence of an adjuvant, what's also possible is that, let's say, the vaccine has been delivered to the body and the immune system does not recognize it at all. So immune system does not recognize it, and it is just flushed out of the system. So in that case, it did not have any impact on the body. So that is where adjuvants are required. Adjuvants will create a local immune response. They'll create a local immune response. They'll ensure that they are able to divert the attention of the immune system towards themselves. So they'll start creating ruckus. It's like going in front of police station and then you start maybe uh, stealing somebody's bike from outside the police station itself. So you are going there so that you can get their attention. So getting this attention is the role of an adjuvant, so that the immune system does not miss it. The immune system does not miss the vaccine. So that's why adjuvants become very, very crucial components of a vaccine. Now, lastly, there's one more topic here, and this is the efficacy of a vaccine. Now, when it comes to efficacy of a vaccine, just understand what we mean by efficacy. But before that, we'll first go through clinical trials. That what exactly do we mean by clinical trial? Now, before any vaccine is entering the market, once it is about to be released into the market, it has to go through this entire process of clinical trials, and then only it is released for the market. So what do we do here? First and foremost, once the vaccine has been prepared, we'll do all the lab studies on it. We'll try to understand all the physical and the chemical properties of it. Are there possibilities of any side effects? Are there any issues that it is going to cause in the long term or short term? So we'll try to understand each and everything. We'll do a massive, detailed study on the vaccine that has been prepared. That will be done. Then after that, there will be certain testings that will happen. For example, we discussed how stem cells are used for drug testing. So stem cells can be used, and we might use the vaccine on the stem cells or the tissues, the organs that have been grown out of stem cells, just to check whether everything is working fine, just to see if it has any positive or negative impact. So we'll do that. So these lab studies will happen, plus sometimes it will also be tested on animals. It might be tested on some other animals which are genetically close to us, like monkeys or rats or rabbits, etc. On them, unfortunately, but this is how it goes. uh, it will be tested on them, and we'll see their response. We'll see whether it is affecting them negatively or not, or it has only and only positive impact on them. So there are all these lab studies that will be done first. Once that is cleared, once this is good, then it enters the phase 1 of clinical trial. Now, in this particular scenario, the first phase of clinical trial is where a small number of people will maybe volunteer, and the vaccine will be tested on them. So it might be around 50 people. There might be around 50 people on which this vaccine will be tested. And if everything is fine, and this is not a fixed number, 50 is not a fixed number, it could be 30, 20, 60, 70. So it's not really a fixed number, but near abouts. All right. So first it will be tested on all these people. If everything is fine, it goes to phase 2, when a lot more people, let's say around 500 in number, it will be tested on them. And if all's good, everything is fine, then we test it on even a larger population. So they will test it on, let's say, 5,000 people or thereabouts. And if it's all good, then it goes to the last phase of clinical trial, where there might be up to 50,000 people, sometimes more, sometimes less, and it will be tested on them. So if it has been able to clear all these phases of trials and there's nothing that is to worry about, there's no problem that we found, then in that case it is finally released into the market. Then it is ready for release in the market. Now this entire process largely, or in most of the cases, it takes a lot of time. It takes up to 8 to 10 years of time, sometimes even 20 years of time. The leprosy vaccine that has been developed in India, it has taken up to 35 years of time. It has taken such a huge amount of time for this vaccine to be uh, available for us. And and this entire process of making the vaccine and going through these all these processes is not that easy. I don't know how many of you even know about a film also that has been made on this topic. There is there is a Hindi film that has been made on this topic. The name of the film is Ek Doctor Ki Maut. uh, and a film that is almost 30 years old film. No, not Vaccine War. Vaccine War is pretty I'm talking about the entire process of all these things that happen, and what one person has to go through in making this vaccine. So there was a film called Ek Doctor Ki Maut on this leprosy vaccine itself. It was made on leprosy vaccine. So uh, so you'll understand how difficult this entire scenario could be for somebody who's even trying to make a vaccine. So now, so these clinical trials will happen, and then after that, the last phase of clinical trial is where we also measure something called as the efficacy of a vaccine. Right? We measure something called as efficacy of a vaccine. Now, efficacy of a vaccine in a manner is an indication of, when you are giving the vaccine to a population, how many of them are responding positively to it. So that's basically an indicator, right? So efficacy. So what happens in efficacy and how we calculate efficacy, just look at this figure. This is the case study of the Pfizer vaccine, or the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, uh, that was used largely in the US. Now there, in the test of efficacy, there were a total of 43,000 participants. Now these 43,000 participants, they were a part of the clinical trials. Now out of these 43,000 participants, there were 170 participants who got infected with COVID-19 even after being vaccinated. All right, even after being vaccinated, they still got infected with COVID-19. Now how these studies are done, just understand this, that this number 43,000 will be divided into two groups. So there will be one group of 21,500 people, and there will be another group of 21,500 people. All right. So there are two groups of 21,500 people, making a total of 43,000. Now let's say in first scenario, let's say in scenario one, there were 85 people out of 170 who were vaccinated, and yet they got infected with COVID-19, and there were the rest 85 who received, although they had received placebo. Uh, so do you know what is placebo? Placebo is something where it is not the actual medicine or the vaccine, but rather you are made to believe that that's what the case is. So for example, instead of vaccine, they might be just delivering water through an injection to your body, and you do not know that. You have no idea that you have been actually administered with water instead of vaccine. So that is what placebo is, that you do not know, your brain does not know, and it believes that uh, it's the actual vaccine or the actual medicine. So what happens is that out of these two groups, one group will be given the actual vaccine, and the second one will not be given the vaccine but rather the placebo, and they don't know that they haven't been given the vaccine. Now, let's say in scenario one, there were 85 people who, after getting vaccinated, they still got COVID 19, and 85 who received placebo and got COVID 19. Then, in that case, efficacy is zero. It's not effective at all, right? Whether you get vaccinated or you don't get vaccinated, you're still suffering from the disease. Let's say scenario two, out of these 170, all these 170 were the ones who received placebo, and they were none of the ones who had actually were vaccinated. Then in that case, we'll say that the efficacy is 100%, because everyone vaccinated not getting infected, everyone not actually vaccinated getting infected. So in that particular scenario, we'll say that the efficacy rate is 100%. The actual scenario, what actually happened was that out of the 170 people who got infected, there were 8 from the vaccinated group, and there were 162 from the non-vaccinated group. And that is how the calculation of efficacy rate is done, to be 95%. How do we arrive at this 95? That you have 162 out of 170 people who are suffering, and this comes out to be almost 95.2%. So that is basically how the calculation of efficacy rate is done, on the basis of who's vaccinated and who's not. Now, one thing to be understood, and you might have seen that there are all these numbers that were available for us, that Pfizer has 95% efficacy, Moderna has 94%, Sputnik has 92%, and then AstraZeneca, which basically is the Covishield vaccine, has just 67%, and so on. In case of, for example, Covaxin, it was said to be 78 to 80%. So it might so seem that these are not good vaccines, because they have efficacy rates of just 78% or 67%. So you might think that, oh, these are not good vaccines to administer. But many a times, efficacy rate does not give the clear picture, because you do not know the conditions under which the efficacy rates were calculated. So, for example, ideally, you should have all kinds of people coming from different ethnicities, people coming from different age groups, people who have a medical history, people who have no medical history. So you should have a mix of all these kind of people to have the actual results out. But the pharma industry is also a very highly competitive industry, and many a times they would want the highest numbers, because they know that their entire business is dependent on that. And unfortunately, Pfizer is a very notorious company. If you look at the history of Pfizer and the number of legal battles here and there and the controversies that it has been around, you'll find a lot of stories of Pfizer. So sometimes that's why this may not be the correct picture, this may not be the real picture of what's going on ground. So, and that is what we also saw, that an AstraZeneca vaccine or a Covishield vaccine fared better against some of the deadliest variants of COVID 19, like the Delta variant. It was able to do better against it as compared to an mRNA vaccine like Pfizer. So, although you see that you have a better efficacy rate with Pfizer, you do not know how or under what conditions has it been tested. Have you tested it for every possible variant? Have you tested for all the mutations that will happen in the future? Are you proof? Do you have the proof against it? So there are so many factors that come in many a times, and that's why efficacy rates are many a times not the real picture. Unless the efficacy rates are very very low, then in that case it's problematic. So in all these scenarios, we see that there are things like this that can also be the cases. Now, one thing that we have to understand, that what is the role of the vaccine? The role of the vaccine is to prevent this, right? Prevent death, prevent severe hospitalization cases or severe symptoms. Ideal case scenario, no infection. Even if there is infection, there shouldn't be any symptoms, or they should be asymptomatic, or even if there are symptoms, they should be moderate symptoms. That is what a vaccine should do. And when we look at the data with respect to the efficacy rates with this logic against death and hospitalization, we see that all these vaccines have had almost 100% result. The reason why the later variants or the later mutations of the COVID-19 did not have a big impact was, one, because of the mutations were weaker, but also second, that the vaccines already had been administered to a large population, and that helps us in securing against this disease, because now we have an immunity. Now the immunity develops against these diseases, and that's why we see that vaccination becomes very crucial from that perspective. Right. So this is about this chapter. We'll end the session here today. The next chapter, that is defense, as a very small chapter though, will start on Monday, and after that we'll move on to our next two, the last two chapters that we are left with. One is intellectual property rights, and then we have IT and communication. So these are the three chapters that we are left with for Monday and Tuesday. And I'm sure you are all aware that on Wednesday we'll have a doubt session. So if you have any doubts while you read, and you have anything extra that you want to ask me, I'll be available for that session for that particular purpose. All right. So if you have any doubts, please let me know. Placebo and vaccine taken at a time or separately? No, there will be two different sets of population on which these will be, or participants on which it will be given. Is there any concern related to vaccines? There have been certain concerns, certain reactions, but largely they have been very, very effective. Please repeat. mRNA vaccine. So in mRNA vaccine, instead of delivering the pathogen to the body, we deliver mRNA to the body. And the mRNA, after entering the body, it starts making the proteins, or it starts making the antigens inside the body itself. And then the immune system will again have the same response as what we had discussed. My email id is rasesh.kumar at byju's.com. Nobel Prize Medicine 2023 given for mRNA vaccine. Yes, yes, you're correct. Pathogens mean bacteria and virus. Pathogens basically anything that will cause some kind of disease in the body. So largely these are microorganisms like bacteria, virus, fungi, or protozoa. All these will be called as pathogens. What is the difference between inactivated and live attenuated vaccine? As I told you, inactivated is where you already kill the germ or kill the pathogen and then insert it inside the body. Whereas live attenuated, this pathogen is still alive, although it is very inactive. It is almost dead. Why is it called messenger RNA? Because it carries the instructions. It carries the instructions, carries the message for creating all the proteins, all the instruction. It is the instruction book basically for creating the uh, creating the proteins. I've raised many doubts, don't get the reply. No, you ask the questions now. I don't see your question at all here. Yellow fever is what kind of fever? It's a very different disease. It's not a kind of fever, but rather a completely different kind of disease, a pathogen based disease. How many questions are asked from this chapter in prelims and mains? One question has come in the mains examination, a few questions actually in prelims, but that was also largely a current affairs based questions that they had asked. Are Novavax vaccines are also used? Yes, they are used. If a lot of questions I've already answered, these are repeated questions. Is polio vaccine? No, polio vaccine we use against polio. mRNA gives message to whom? Gives it to other RNA for developing the proteins. Medicine expires after some months or years. Is it covered in? No, expiry happens because of the chemicals that are used. The chemicals are not usable after a while. Zycov D, they are used for children. Yes, they can be. Not for pets though. Why vaccines efficiency reduces after some time? Mainly what happens is that the memory cells that are created, these memory cells do not last forever. They would last for a certain amount of time. Now that also depends on what kind of vaccine you have taken. So sometimes it may last only for 1 or 2 years. In certain cases it might last for 5 to 7 or 8 years. So depends on the kind of vaccine and the process of making the vaccine. So we see that the memory cells ultimately will lose the memory cells. So then after that a revaccination will be required. So for example, let's say even in case of the additional doses that have been recommended for even COVID-19, that's the case. The booster dose, as we call them. So the booster dose is required so that the memory cells are not lost. And if at all they might have been lost, we'll try to regenerate them. All right. So let's end the class here. If you have any further doubts, please read everything and you can bring back the doubts on Monday and we can have a discussion on them. So this is it for this class. Thank you very much for joining. So hope you enjoy your holidays tomorrow and we get to see India win in the World Cup tomorrow. So all the best to all of you and all the best to all of us and all of the country. Thank you.